across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning to you. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Very much appreciate you joining me on a really shocking morning. Just a really, really shocking morning. We're going to obviously be talking a lot about what's happened in Ukraine overnight. No, we're not. Do you know what I mean? It matters. What happens in Ukraine matters. But, oh, my God, what is going on with the British media that they can do 10 minutes about that and goodness knows what on every other topic, and they don't seem to understand about what has happened in the Henry Novak case and how significant this is for so many British people. We are, of course, going to be talking about that horrific police body cam footage which captured the moments that Henry Novak, just 18 years old, gasped, "I can't breathe." He said, "I can't breathe," an astonishing 9 times, echoing the words, of course, of George Floyd back in 2020 as police knelt on him. Now, it wasn't the police that were responsible for Henry Novak's death. It was Vikram Digwa, convicted last week by a jury unanimously and sentenced yesterday to life behind bars with a minimum 21 years sentence. He had stabbed him 5 times, but crucially, one of the stabbings, first one, was in his chest. Now, police did not search for that stab wound, didn't believe him. "I don't think you have, mate," is what one of the police officers told Henry as he lay dying. It is unbelievably heartbreaking how Henry Novak's parents, how his mum and his dad and how his sister have been able to watch that footage, which was shown in court. I do not know. Only released last night. I watched that footage and I couldn't sleep. I've seen some really harrowing things, and I think, you know, we've horrible stories of child abuse and murder and just horrific events. And there was something so haunting about that video. There was something just so heartbreaking about that video. I just could not get to sleep. There was something just so cold in the police officer's comment, you know, "I don't think you have, mate." The idea that the last conscious moments of a young man, never been in trouble with the police, who was a student, he'd been on a night out, he wasn't even drunk. He would have been legal to drive. He might have sounded like he was drunk to the police, but that was the blood, the 2 pints of blood accumulating in his lungs, preventing him breathe, affecting his brain, putting him into unconsciousness. He wasn't drunk. He was just a young man on a night out who'd had a conversation with a man in the street who had, for some reason, a very long knife, which he was legally allowed to have, as we've discovered, because he was Sikh, and it was, he said, part of his religion, who'd been in an altercation which had no reason whatsoever to have turned into a murder, other than the horrific actions of Vikram Digwa. And I think that footage is going to haunt an awful lot of people. It clearly has not in any way disturbed most of our political and media class, though, because right now, the Peterborough court hearing in Scotland is streaming live on many of our television screens. As I said, the BBC and Sky far more interested in the tittle-tattle, in the Mandelson messages that came out yesterday. And yeah, I would have been talking a lot about that today before we had that sentencing yesterday of Vikram Digwa, before we saw the body cam footage that everyone had been demanding was released by the police, before we just knew that, well, as Nigel Farage so accurately said this morning in an emergency statement a couple of hours ago, we do live in 2-tier Britain. And I want to hear your thoughts on all of that. I want you to give me a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate and text costs 1 standard network rate message. I'm going to play you that footage. I know you've been seeing it on JK's show as well, but I think it's really important. There's a lot of people in my office, I said, have you seen the footage? You're talking about it. Have you seen the footage? You've got to see it from the beginning. When you'll notice right from the very beginning, and it's actually the man who's leaning over Henry Novak is actually the father of Vikram Digwer, who the judge said was no reason to believe he actually realised what had happened, that he actually knew that his son had stabbed Henry. The mother, still behind bars, I think, awaiting trial. The brother certainly had already called 999. There was a reason they were there, and who had openly, blatantly lied. And we know from the court case involving the murderer that there was deliberate conspiracy to lie to the police. But it's really important that you know that the police knew that there'd been a claim that he'd been stabbed, and that the police, when they arrived, knew that his mouth was full of blood, because they were told this by the man tending to him. They could see the blood, and yet they refused to believe that he'd been stabbed. They thought he was lying, thought he was drunk, thought he was the perpetrator, and they were so, I would think, just sort of focused on the idea that this was a white racist man. That's what they thought. This was a drunk white racist man who had attacked a Sikh man, ripped off his turban, racially abused him, called her the P word, as it was claimed in the 999 call. And, you know, that was why they were there. And I can't help thinking that if it had been the other way round, and if it had been a man of Asian appearance lying on the ground saying, I can't breathe, I've been stabbed, and if it had been a white man who was standing there saying, oh, I've got a bit of an injury to my eye, yeah, you know, he hasn't been stabbed, it's a lie, that the police would have acted very, very differently. So I'm going to play you the footage. Don't look away. There's not anything graphically gruesome in it, but you need to hear the words. You need to see what happened before you can know what you really think about this. So let's have a little watch and a look at that body cam footage from the police on the scene on the night.
Right. He keeps dropping side to side, so I'm just trying to keep him set up. Right. He's got a mouth full of blood. I don't want him. I can't breathe. I can't breathe.
Grab his other arm. What's happened to you, right?
Been stabbed.
You've been stabbed? Whereabouts? Don't think you have, mate. What's your name, mate? At the moment you are under arrest. That's for assault, so you do not have to say anything, may harm in defence. If you do not make your main questions, it's up to which you later rely in court. Anything you do say may be given in evidence, alright? He's going to be sick, I think. He's saying he's been stabbed, so let's just check him.
Where do you think he's been stabbed? In the face? Oh no, but we have to check, don't we?
Right.
In the face?
Just get these to back off, get their details on that, and I'll keep hold of him.
You'll notice from that, at some point they do say we need to check if he's been stabbed. Do you know what that involved? If you actually were watching that on YouTube rather than listening on DAB Plus radio, they lifted his shirt up by, I'm going to go an inch. Not quite sure that's checking. It is absolutely harrowing. Now, the judge in court, in his sentencing remarks yesterday, made it very clear that according to the forensic experts who looked into the injuries that Henry Novak suffered, that actually, whatever medical treatment he had, he would have died of those injuries because he'd been stabbed in the lung. His lungs had filled up with blood, and he was going to die from internal bleeding. But the fact, and this is something that his own father, Mark Novak, said in a statement outside court yesterday, incredibly dignified family, incredibly dignified, and saying, it's the fact that, the last words that his son heard was, being read his rights and not being believed, not being helped, not having any kindness, not having anyone trying to help him, not any hope that he would survive, being handcuffed as he lay dying. He told them 4 times he had been stabbed. He told them 9 times, I can't breathe. And the police just shrugged and they didn't care. Is this two-tier policing? Is this about, as many are claiming, is this about Black Lives Matter when it's by the way, numerously convicted criminal on the other side of the Atlantic who's been killed by police, then Black Lives Matter, but actually white lives don't matter here, and actually the police are just far, far, far too concerned with an allegation of a race crime that at worst had led to a turban being pulled off. No one thought that anything worse than that happened. None of that had happened, by the way. There hadn't been a race crime of any sort. That was a complete lie from the murderer, Vikram Digwa. But the fact that the police, at the point when someone is saying, I can't breathe, where there is blood, where there is no risk of it, no one is being violent, there's no confusion at that point in terms of anyone being a risk to anyone else. They chose not to believe the man lying on the ground, and they believed the man who was standing up saying he was the victim. Is this two-tier policing? Is this what we've all been talking about? And is this what it leads to? Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. It's a number to get in touch. Let's talk about this with Roy Ram. He's a former commander of Special Operations at New Scotland Yard. Roy, thank you so much for joining me.
Good morning.
Morning. I'm sure you were, you'll have seen a lot worse than most of us will ever have seen. And thank God we've got people like you who deal with the dirty business in our country that we don't have to. But I'm sure you were as shocked as I was watching that video. It was finally released by the police last night. It appears almost callous reaction from certainly the male police officer whose body cam footage we've got to someone saying, I can't breathe. What did you make of what the police did? And do you agree with the likes of Nigel Farage, who says this is proof that we are living in two-tier Britain?
Well, let's strip this apart. I think that what I saw last night, two aspects of it. First of all, the footage of the incident. This young man posed no threat whatsoever. He was clearly distressed. The police officers were told he had blood in his mouth, and they should have treated him as a victim. There was no need for him to be handcuffed, quite clearly. And I think that the officers there reacted to what they had been told without balance and without challenge. And it was a disgrace and deeply, deeply saddening. I think that the statement from Henry Novak's father was utterly remarkable. I thought he was as articulate and constrained as anybody could possibly be in such circumstances.
He also made it very clear that the only person he holds responsible for the death of his son is Vikram Digwa, not the police.
Yes, he did. But also, I think that in his statement, which I listened to very carefully, he was right to say that there needs to be something that goes beyond the IOPC inquiry. The IOPC inquiry will deal with the officers that reacted just at that moment. But there needs to be an understanding that there needs to be an inquiry to understand if there is such an emphasis on racism that officers in frontline operational positions are fearful of doing their job. And I think that there is emerging evidence. There's a whole body of evidence now that says police are far too constrained because they're worried that they're going to be accused of racism.
Yeah, and this is the thing. And I've been messaging with police officers who I know personally, and one of them said, you know, he had actually been in a similar incident where a man had died after being stabbed, and basically, you know, he came across as a drunken man. He said there were no obvious wounds. He was stabbed through clothing, and he bled out internally, horribly similar. But he says, you know, experience would tell you, if someone says they've been stabbed, you check. Now, there's no proper checking. There is simply no proper check. They literally do the most cursory lifting up of the man's shirt. I mean, just to look at, you know, they don't even go past his belly button. And of course, he'd been stabbed higher than that. And that would have been that's policing 101 at that point. He was no risk to anybody. They could have easily pulled up. He was wearing a dark jumper. It was dark. It was raining. They could easily have lifted up his jumper, and they would have seen the stab wound. And then perhaps, you know, you'd like to think that, you know, at least they would have been more sympathetic to him in his final moments of consciousness. But as my friend said to me, you know, maybe young, fairly inexperienced coppers, but the fact that once they were told there was a race crime, there is an immediate aggravating factor, and everything then becomes about that, because that is what you're going to be judged on, and the exact way that you handle that side of things is going to be your concern, and
I think
that's unacceptable.
Yes, it is unacceptable, and I think that's the point of the need for an inquiry that goes beyond a narrow IOPC inquiry to the facts of that case. We have to know whether police training and culture it has embedded a mindset that says white people are all racist and black people are not violent. You know, I think that there's what's been institutionalized in policing now is a fear of doing your job. That's the institutionalized problem that we really need to understand.
Yeah, absolutely. But also, I mean, a lot of people are raising the issue about this, the fact that this man was just walking around with a 21-centimetre sword. Now, you know, walking around with a knife not allowed. You know, unless you got your receipt from the shop where you bought your, you know, you're on your way home with other kitchen goods. You ain't carrying a knife in public. That's legal. But there is a, you know, if it's ceremonial, if it's traditional national dress or something. No, I'm sorry. That law's got to be changed today, hasn't it?
Yeah, you know, I think we need to operate under one law. And my personal feeling is that if the Sikh religion requires some kind of a totem, fine. But let's make sure it hasn't got a tip.
Well, no, lots of Sikhs are pointing out, I mean, you know, you can just have, there's a pin you can have on your turban which has the sword in it, the small sword. There's no, most Sikhs in this country do not walk around carrying a sodding sword.
I agree. And certainly the idea of having, you know, a lethal weapon on you, it is not a totem of your religion.
No, absolutely. Let's play a little clip of what Nigel Farage, the leader of Reform, had to say, because he was speaking out this morning about this issue. It's something he's talked about a lot, and a lot of people, I think, will claim that he is, you know, basically trying to rile things up, and he's basically escalating things. But I think a lot of other people would also say, and I'd be on the side of those people, that, you know, people are not talking about this enough. Let's have a watch and listen of what Nigel Farage had to say.
He was actually treated in a way that meant an accusation of a racial slur was treated more seriously than an act of murder. What does he say? I can't breathe. Familiar words? Remember career criminal George Floyd, who died in appalling circumstances in Midwest America a few years ago. Remember the reaction to that and the way the police behaved. Within a few days, Keir Starmer was taking the knee. Black Lives Matter exploded all over the country. Churchill's statue was defaced. The cenotaph was vandalised. And yet, what has the public reaction been from our leaders and politicians, and indeed, to be frank, much of the media to this? Silence. Absolute silence. Proof, if ever there was any, that we're living in a two-tier culture in this country where the rights and privileges of white people matter less than those of ethnic minorities.
And that, Roy Ram, is what a lot of people will feel. And certainly, looking at the statement from Keir Starmer, I mean, bearing in mind we had the guilty verdict on Friday, we knew a lot of the details of this case on Friday. Yesterday, we finally got a statement from Keir Starmer just before 7 p.m. last night, saying this is an awful, shocking case. Henry's loved ones have gone through the trauma of a long trial and endured Henry's killer making up appalling claims about their son, who was thoughtful, kind and deeply loved. It is right that the IOPC is investigating the police's response to his senseless murder, and we must end the cycle of tragedy by tackling the horror of knife crime. Henry's family, friends, his university and the city of Southampton will continue to feel his loss, and our thoughts will always be with them. Which, you know, is a perfectly nice and reasonable message from a Prime Minister. But as I've tweeted out, you know, when you're going on your knees, because the Prime Minister was on his knees for George Floyd, taking a knee in 2020, but not for this man. I mean, I know we're not talking about police brutality. We're talking about brief police, incompetence, double standards, anti-white racism, but we're talking about white officers in this case. I realise it's not in lots of ways the same as the George Floyd case, but the silence of our political leaders and much of the media on this is very telling, isn't it?
Yeah, I think there are legitimate parallels to be drawn between the I should say comparisons to be drawn between the two incidents, and I think the political reaction in the UK is kind of reflected in this fear of being accused of racism again.
Yeah.
And I think and that's what's led to it being embedded in policing. I think we all have to stand up and say, look, it's one law for all, and we have to react in the same way. I mean, I thought, frankly, the taking of the knee was an appalling tokenism.
And we spoke out about it on this show from day one.
Sure. But all I would say to politicians is read what Henry Novak's father said. Read it all. Yes, weep for the family, quite rightly, but listen to the underlying message of what that man is saying.
Yeah.
Did my son die, in custody because you have managed to embed in British policing a fear of doing your job with equality and equanimity because you are so scared of being accused of racism?
And we saw this. Look, we saw this in the Southport riots. We saw it in riots that happened only days earlier as well, where again and again, and we see this in the policing of things like the pro-Palestinian marches and the United Kingdom marches. Very, should we say, proactive policing in some cases, nearly always when you're talking about a cause that's either on the right or is largely white people, and the Southport riots were largely white people. Again, a lot of them actually, by the way, let's be honest, they were criminal. They weren't just people who were angry and wanted justice for the victims of Axel Rudiger Barnett. They were people who were absolutely criminals. They had long records themselves. But we saw completely different policing of, say, Muslim gangs, because obviously the talk at the time was that it was a man who, Axel Rudiger Barnett was a refugee boat arrival. But we saw, police being told, police telling people, take your weapons, take your machetes and your weapons and take them back to the mosque and tell people to go home. Now, that is not how white people are policed. And this is the thing. All we are asking for is that everyone is policed the same, held to the same standard, treated in the same way. I don't care whether if someone is white, black, Muslim, I couldn't care less what their religion is, couldn't care less what colour their skin is. You treat people the same expectations of behaviour, of doing what you're told, of not being abusive, not whatever. And it does appear to, I think, an awful lot of us, again and again and again, we keep having more and more evidence that is not what is happening.
I think, it's quite clear that if you look way back, there were real problems in policing, unarguable.
Absolutely.
But the pendulum has swung too far, and it needs to be brought back to the centre. And I think it's about fairness, it's about treating everybody in the same way. And there is now, I think, an unconscious bias, or maybe a conscious bias, towards accepting what a person of colour says against what a white person says, certainly in this instance, very evidently.
Yeah, absolutely. Roy Ram, really appreciate you coming on. Thank you very much. Former Commander of Specialist Operations at New Scotland Yard. Going to take a quick break. Going to get your calls. Not surprisingly, a lot of you want to have your say. 0344 499 1000 is a number to get in touch to have your say. Police body cam footage showing police ignored the dying knife victim, Henry Novak's pleas for help after his attacker claimed he had been racially abused. I want to hear what you have to say. Do we live in two-tier Britain when it comes to policing? What do you think would have been the outcome if those two men's races had been the opposite way around? That's what I want to know. Give us a call. This is Talk.
they found a label now, Ian, which allows them to sit at home on tablets, wasting their time.
Wow.
You know, you've got the welfare state, I've already said, wonderful thing, isn't it? But a safety net, not a way of life.
When you're talking about crimes as vicious as rape, if someone is capable of doing that, they're a threat to society.
If they don't know that all of these things are wrong, then by definition, we need them off the streets.
This is the worst one I've ever come across.
But it's where you've got with this woke, fluffy, liberal, progressive nonsense about anti-racism.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, for me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 10:29 is the time. Look, there are other stories. We're going to talk about those Mandelson files. We're going to be talking about Ukraine. We're going to be talking about lots of other stories today. But I'm sorry that the number one story has simply got to be this horrific stabbing to death and the abject failure of the police, the abject refusal of the police to help Henry Novak as he lay dying and as he begged them for help, telling them he'd been stabbed and telling them he could not breathe, only to be told, I don't think you have, mate, very glibly by a police officer. We know this now from the body cam footage released by the police last night. Let's get to your calls, your reaction. John is in London. John, what do you want to say?
Morning, Julia.
Morning.
My concern here is that, and just before I say that, actually, I bear no ill will or cast any blame towards the Sikh community.
Now, can I just say, that's a given. Do you know what I mean? Do we need to say that?
I do think we need to say that because I think people make assumptions that perhaps the majority, if not all, are carrying around weapons like that, which isn't the case.
Absolutely not, no. By the way, this man, this killer, Vikram Digwa, had been expelled from his temple because they were unhappy about his behaviour long before this. So, you know, that tells you, you know, quite a lot, doesn't it?
Exactly, and looking into his background and all the martial arts side, and I'm a lifetime martial artist and instructor, and to me there was a lot of warning signs there. Yeah. But that aside, the assumption's been made that the police couldn't have done anything, but by the time they got there. But I think what's not being asked is how long was poor Henry lying on the floor before the brother made that call?
Well, yeah, I mean, he was chased. Not very long. We do know because there is actually, as if you can read the sentencing remarks, just 10 pages from the sentencing remarks of the judge yesterday. Even if you didn't follow the whole trial, it's very clear that, you know, actually one of the things that one of the aggravating factors actually was that the killer actually stole that. One of the reasons there was altercation, stole Henry's phone. Henry was filming him and saying, you know, are you a bad man? I mean, jokingly, not aggressively. It's on video when he saw him with his weapon. Yeah, you know, moments you wish that never had happened, but not a reasonable thing to sort of joke about, perhaps, at the time. And they know what time that was filmed. So it was a very, very short period of time.
I would finish, though, with Julie, that I was brought up in a very strict home, along with my siblings, to respect law and order, to respect the police. That respect's gone, completely gone. Yeah. Not just because of this, but other things that I've seen happen over my lifetime. I was 70 in April, and it's not the police, and I've got retired police friends and some current police friends, but the police are not what they were.
I agree, and that's what my police officer friends often say. You know, everyone I know who's a police officer is counting down the days, the hours, the seconds until they can retire and walk away because it's not the job anymore.
They're losing the respect of the average person, Julia.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's dangerous.
And they're losing the consent, policing by consent in this country. Absolutely agree with you, David. Sorry, John. Thank you very much. David is in Dorset. David, what do you want to say?
That's right, Julia. I remember from when we lived in Australia and we had students in our college, and they used to tell us that they had to carry a symbolic version of the knife. And just having a quick look this morning, countries like Italy, Denmark, the Netherlands, Canada, Sikhs are only allowed to carry a very small, tiny bladed knife. I think it's got to be under 2 inches or something. I mean, there's
like
no
a
reason
pocket knife,
why,
effectively, yeah.
What's smaller than that, I think. You know, it's a very small blade. But, I mean, I don't understand why we can't change that part of the law so the same law applies to all of us, you know?
Yeah, well, exactly. Of course we can. And I think that will be changed. The vast majority of Sikhs are not walking around with a very long-bladed weapon, and they're certainly not using it. Again, I think we need to make this about the one man who committed the murder, but we also need to make sure that in the event of, you know, if someone's carrying a weapon, have they been subject to the same laws as everyone else? And clearly he was not, because he was legally allowed to carry that weapon when no one else would be. And do the police react equally when that weapon is used? Appreciate your call, David. Lots more calls on the board, lots of your message. We're going to get to those in a moment. Going to take a quick break. Then we're going to be talking to the Shadow Policing Minister, Chairman of the Tory Party, Matt Vickers MP. We're also, after that, going to be talking to Robert Jenrick, who's for reform. That's coming up next. Stay tuned. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 10:36 is the time. Lots to talk about. Coming up, we're going to be talking to Robert Jenrick, Reform's Treasury spokesman. We're going to talk to him, of course, about this Henry Novak murder and the just horrific body cam footage we've seen from the police. Let's talk about this right now and with other stories with Matt Vickers MP. He's the Deputy Chairman of the Conservative Party and Shadow Policing Minister. Good morning to you, Matt.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you for joining us. I don't know about you, I saw the video, this full video that was put out by the police yesterday of what happened when the police attended the Henry Novak murder. And I have to say, I really struggled to get to sleep. It was so haunting, hearing, you know, a man say 9 times he couldn't breathe, 4 times that he'd been stabbed, and to be told, I don't think you have, mate, very glibly by a police officer who could have been helping him instead of handcuffing him and reading his rights as he fell into unconsciousness with 2 pints of blood in his lungs. Absolutely horrific circumstances. Do you agree with Nigel Farage, the Reform Party leader, who says this is all evidence that we live and proof that we live in two-tier Britain when it comes to our policing?
Well, I think first and foremost, this is about a young guy who lost his life rather than about Nigel Farage, but actually devastating. When you think what that young man's gone through, when you think about the fact you hear those police sirens in a situation like that, and you think that means someone's coming to your aid, somebody is coming to help you, to then have those cuffs turned on you, it's just devastating. That footage is out there now. His family are getting to see that, and just imagine how it feels to watch your child or a family member of yours going through that. Absolutely devastating, guttering. It can't go on like this. The reality is, we saw what went on with Floyd. We imported a problem from America with the Henry Floyd thing.
George Floyd.
Got obsessed. We got obsessed with racism with the police. We told the police, oh, terrible racism, all the training that now goes in. We now tell the police over and over again that racism is such a huge issue. Actually, if you make it a big issue, if you spend all of the time that the police do in training talking about how you deal with people of a certain race, of a certain colour, of a certain creed or religion, then that is how they view the world. Actually, you need to put all those boundaries down. You need to treat everybody, regardless of their race, religion, faith, anything. You need to treat them in the same way. The minute we start being obsessed about dividing people, about looking for those differences, the police react accordingly.
But hold on a minute, 2020, remind me who was in power then, because a lot of this happened under the Tories. There seems to be an awful lot of time where we have, the Prime Minister say during the, the Southport riots, where the Prime Minister could apparently say, I want you to prioritise this kind of policing, I want the courts to sit around the clock, I want everything to happen. And then we're told, pro-Palestinian march, oh, there's nothing we can do about anything. Oh, nothing we can do. Now, the Home Office, the Prime Minister, they are able to actually direct a lot of this, to require certain actions. They are able to do that. That didn't happen. A lot of this happened under the Tory watch for 4 long years.
You go back and look at the record, Julia. This thing has been called out time and time again. I've been in that chamber calling out that Home Secretary when they recently brought forward that anti-racism action plan that actually tells people, police officers, to look at trying to artificially alter arrest rates. You are disproportionately arresting people of a certain race. Well, that's what happens when people commit crimes. Policing needs to be colourblind. The more we obsess with trying to tinker one way or the other, the more mixed the results get. We tell police officers not to approach things and look for knives, not to be looking at race, to look at how we deal with people of different colours and creeds. That obsession has to end. We have to get to the bottom.
But that happened for years under the Tory watch as well. That was happening. The non-crime hate incidents you all hate so much in the Tory party now, they came in 2014. Nothing was done about it. The Home Secretary after Home Secretary said this should end. No one actually stopped it from happening. This is the thing a lot of people say when the Tories say, oh, this is all terrible now. But this didn't just happen overnight in early July 2024. When the Labour Party got in.
You go back and look at the record. Kemi called it out at the time. She said this was wrong. Since I've been Shadow Policing Minister, you can look at everything that I've had to say in the chamber.
No, I completely accept you're saying it all now.
No,
but
we said it then.
This didn't happen out of the blue since Labour came to power.
Kemi called this out in 2021. She said this was going the wrong way, that this obsession with racism, that means our police officers sit there and spend all of the training not learning how to deal with crime, but learning how to treat different groups of people differently.
So do you accept?
I've called out consistently since becoming the Shadow Policing Minister.
Do you accept that this is proof we live in two-tier Britain? When people say they think we have two-tier policing, and from Southport riots and different communities policed in different ways, whether it's the pro-Palestinian marches and the United Kingdom march and the policing, the way these 2 men were treated at the moment, do you accept that people are right to say, right to feel, right to judge that we are no longer living in a country where police are, policing us by consent in a neutral, unbiased way?
I think the reason that they're not, I don't think any police officer goes out there to treat different groups differently. They arrive there, they get trained, they get this stuff thrown down their neck that we should always be looking firstly at racism. We should always be looking at...
Who funds their training?
You'll have seen in the chamber, we've called out the College of Policing on what they're doing on this. We've called out the anti-racism strategy that the government put forward, because there is an obsession, there is a panic about this. Actually, it goes both ways. We look at grooming gangs, the inability to call certain groups out, the fear around actually being upright and calling these things out as they exist. We do not need to start countering, though. We need to start balancing this thing, levelling this thing, so that every police officer who arrives at a scene like this looks at it in a colour-blind manner, regardless of race.
Do you believe that if it had been an Asian man lying on the ground saying, I can't breathe, with blood in his mouth, saying, I've been stabbed, and it was a white man saying, I've been racially attacked, and oh, look, I've got a bruise above my eye, as this man was saying, and who'd made the call, his family member had made the call, the 999 call, do you think the police would have behaved differently?
I think everybody at home will probably assume exactly the same as what you're suggesting.
No, I'm asking you.
Not to counter, we need to fix this thing.
No, I asked you a question.
Colourblind.
Do you think that the police would have behaved differently?
I think there is a likelihood that they would have been treated differently. The reason is because we say that racism is a one-way thing. Racism, I think, any police officer, any member of the public knows what racism is. They know what's right, they know what's wrong. Actually, this obsession is what creates the situation. And we need to look at the specifics of what went on here, because somehow there was a failure on the part of those police officers to identify that this young man was being murdered in front of their eyes.
I mean, they didn't even. They could have thought he had been a racist, and he had done. They could have thought all of that at that time, but there still was a priority when someone says they've been stabbed and they can't breathe. That when there's no physical danger to them, should have been their top priority. Thank you very much for your comments. Now, I want to ask you also about the Mandelson files. We had a whole new tranche of files released yesterday. Lots of people are saying, look, no real smoking gun there when it comes to what we actually learned. The damage is already done to the Prime Minister, to this government. Mandelson, of course, is currently facing a police investigation into wrongdoing, which he denies in his acting in public office. But one crucial thing that did come out was this extraordinary message exchange between Peter Mandelson and a very senior figure, now the Work and Pensions Secretary, Pat McFadden, very close to the Prime Minister, where he complained that all of his conversations with Labour MPs, all they want to ask is, who can we tax in order to pay benefits to others? This prompted within moments a Tory attack campaign saying this is the benefit party, the welfare party, not the Labour Party. How damaging do you think that is?
I think, do you know what? He's telling us what we already knew. We know that with this Labour government, the more you work, the more you pay in tax. The people who don't work are taking more and more home in benefits. We know that's what it's all about. We're seeing record levels of tax. We're seeing record levels of benefits. The system is not working for Joe Bloggs out there who's working hard and doing the right thing. And it's not good for those people who are on benefits to be sat at home all day. The cure to many of these issues, to anxiety, to depression, is to get out there, to live an active life, to fulfill your aspirations and ambitions. This is disastrous for this country. Not only is it disastrous for those people on benefits, but anybody who tries to set up a business, who tries to do the right thing, to create jobs, is being absolutely battered by tax. They're disincentivised from working. They're disincentivised from looking after their families. And anybody who's made a hell of a lot of money in this country is currently looking at whether they're going to stay here or not.
Well, if they haven't already gone. Appreciate you joining us. Matt Vickers, MP, Shadow Policing Minister, also Deputy Chair of the Conservative Party. Going to take a quick break. Up next, going to be talking to Robert Jenrick, former UK's Treasury spokesman, about both the Henry Novak case and also those Mandelson files as well. This is Talk.
They found a label now, Ian, which allows them to sit at home on tablets, wasting their time.
Wow.
You know, you've got the welfare state, I've already said, wonderful thing, isn't it? But a safety net, not a way of life.
When you're talking about crimes as vicious as rape, if someone is capable of doing that, they're a threat to society.
If they don't know that all of these things are wrong, then by definition, we need them off the streets.
This is the worst one I've ever come across.
But it's where you've got with this woke, fluffy, liberal, progressive nonsense about anti-racism.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 10:48 is the time. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Let's talk right now to Robert Jenrick, MP, Reform UK's Treasury spokesman. Good morning to you, Robert.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you for joining us. I wish you were joining us on I suppose a happier news day. I'm sure you, like me, like many of us, watched that video finally released by the police of the body cam footage from the police officers who first attended the scene when Henry Novak lay dying after being stabbed by Vikram Digwa, who was convicted last week and sentenced yesterday to life sentence and 21 years behind bars. And that footage, we played a bit earlier in the show, absolutely haunting. I don't know about you, I couldn't sleep after watching it. Hearing him say 4 times that he'd been stabbed, 9 times that he couldn't breathe, and being told very glibly, I don't think you have, mate, as he was handcuffed and read his rights just before losing consciousness and then dying. Do you believe that we have 2-tier policing in this country, and that if it had been an Asian man lying on the ground in the same circumstance and a white man claiming he had been racially abused or abused in another way, that things would have turned out differently?
Yes, absolutely. Look, it gives me no pleasure to say it, but we live in a country in which there is now mounting evidence of 2-tier policing. We've seen it in so many different instances, from the grooming gang scandal, the Southport killer and the riots, the Nottingham killer, and now this terrible, terrible incident. There's no doubt in my mind that this young man, Henry Novak, would not have died in this most degrading death, being falsely accused of being a racist and handcuffed on the streets, if he was not a white man. It's because of the colour of his skin that these officers treated him in this appalling manner. And it has to be a turning point. We cannot live in a country in which people are treated differently because of the colour of their skin, and in which police officers are indoctrinated into this anti-white racism that is destroying public trust in policing, the criminal justice system, and the rule of law.
We've had, statements from Keir Starmer. Not taken the knee yet, interestingly. He was happy to take the knee for George Floyd, who was murdered, saying words to the, I can't breathe, to the police officer who had a horrific murder, knelt on his neck. No evidence, interestingly, that was a racist murder. Not one bit of evidence in court in America of that. But 2020, I mean, we had riots, we had the police taking the knee to rioters during lockdown. Black Lives Matter, we were told, Black Lives Matter. Your party leader, Nigel Farage, issued a statement this morning. We played the video out on air, saying, white lives matter. Do you think that white lives don't matter as much in this country?
Well, it seems that way, yes, Julia. Look, there's a squeamishness that is prevalent in clearly the police, public authorities, a part of the media, and politicians when the perpetrator of a terrible crime is an ethnic minority and the victim is a white person. And that is what we've seen once again in this case. I found it astonishing that other than the local constituency member of Parliament, no other MP raised this matter in the House of Commons other than myself. No one at all. The Prime Minister didn't even mention this case. The words Henry Novak didn't cross his lips until yesterday. Neither the Home Secretary. Compare that to the way politicians like this responded to the George Floyd incident, which, whatever one has to say about it, was in another country. It wasn't. Although, of course,
I mean, let's bear in mind, because again, we get grief, here. I'll get people saying, why aren't you talking about a certain case? You can't talk about a case when it's sub judice in this country, whereas, of course, we don't have the same rules in America.
Well, sure, but you can carefully talk about a case without prejudicing it. The idea that you cannot even mention the name of this victim until today is completely for the birds. The reason why the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary didn't talk about it is because it cut across their lifelong ideological view that multiculturalism is an unalloyed good, that ethnic minorities have to be protected and their sensibilities have to be protected, even, and this is the important point, even when the lives of a British citizen are put at risk or cut short in this case.
I mean, lots of criticism of these individual police officers failing to take action. Again, a man says he's been stabbed, he's got blood coming out of his mouth. They make the most cursory attempt. I mean, literally, they lift up his shirt about, an inch. I mean, I've spoken to police officers this morning off air who are very, very clear. The training is very clear. If someone says they've been stabbed, you search for the stab wound. You certainly don't handcuff someone who says I can't breathe, who certainly isn't a threat to anybody. And a lot of that, they simply weren't going through protocol. But they also all said to a man and a woman that the concern would have been, once it was an allegation, they would have been told the 999 call as a racist attack, verbal abuse of a man, calling him the P word, that instantly, that is your number one priority, because you're concerned about that, because that is the priority of chief constables. Now, the NPCC...
Well, Julia, this whole DEI...
Well, can I ask you more? Can I ask you? Give me a second.
To be torn down now.
The National Police Chief Council, they've got a police race action plan that they issued, and it's all about anti-racism. Now, you will know from critical race theory, again, most people living normal lives don't talk about this stuff, but anti-racism is not the same as not being racist. It's about assuming that all white people are racist automatically. We have literally got that embedded in the policing hierarchy of our country. You worked in the Home Office when you were a Conservative. What can be done to rip this out, other than getting rid of the College of Policing, sacking, frankly, every single chief constable? What do we need to do to stop this madness?
Well, you could do some of those things. Look, I think the College of Policing has done a lot to embed this kind of appalling anti-white racism within the police and make it difficult for even those chief constables who do want to create sensible, common sense attitudes within their forces to get on and do their jobs. So, look, I would consider scrapping that whole failed organisation that was created by the last government and has done nothing to improve the quality of policing in this country. But yes, we need to change all of the guidance that police officers are being given and the training that's being provided to them, which somehow turns decent, patriotic, common sense people into individuals who could behave in the way that these officers did at the scene of this crime. And just on the officers in question, I want to see the officer who said those glib comments like, "I don't think you have been stabbed, mate," or "put your hands in the cuff, mate." I want to see him in court being prosecuted for a total dereliction of duty. And any other officer who attended this scene, they should be out of the service. They should be prosecuted too, frankly. People should know that you cannot behave in this way, which is a total breach of your obligation, your duty as a public servant, and get away with it.
Certainly a lot of anger about this. Now, Kemi Badenoch, your former boss, has criticised your current boss, Nigel Farage. She says that his speech this morning, his address to the country, that Nigel Farage is taking sides, that he sees this as an opportunity for him to grandstand. What do you say to that?
No. Look, he's behaving like a leader, and he's channeling the fury that there is, the quiet, cold fury that there is across the country at this appalling incident, and the fact that it is just one of many that have built up over years and years and years. And this cannot be brushed under the carpet. It has to be a moment in which we change forever the way in which policing operates, and in which we tear down the whole failed edifice of multiculturalism that has done so much harm to this country.
There's so much more I want to ask you about this, but I've only got you for a few more minutes. I want to ask you also about this Mandelson files, whether it's Mandelson or what's happening in Ukraine overnight, or Peter Murrell's the case in court today. That seems to be what's obsessing BBC and others today, rather than this story, which I think is very telling and would be very different in a different circumstance. We've got this revelations, no big smoking gun, it must be said, in telling us any more about how unbelievably incompetent and hopeless and useless this government is, and the lack of leadership and the incredibly lax attitude to security of our nation in the vetting of Peter Mandelson. We kind of knew a lot of that already. We did see a lot of tit-for-tat messages between Peter Mandelson and various people, but crucially, and one that other people have picked up on, is Pat McFadden, the now Work and Pensions Secretary, in a message to Peter Mandelson, saying that when he has conversations with Labour MPs, the only thing they're talking about is who can we tax in order to pay benefits to others. Your reaction to that?
The last Labour government became defined by that note that was left on the desk in the Treasury by Liam Byrne, a Treasury Minister, saying that there was no money left. that they had spaffed away billions and billions of taxpayers' money and left the country on the verge of bankruptcy. And this government under Keir Starmer is going to be defined by that WhatsApp message from Pat McFadden to Peter Mandelson, in which he says that they have wasted 2 years raising taxes on everything possible, from farmers to pensioners to small business people, just to spend it on Benefit Street, to spend it on people who are choosing not to work. And the hard-working people of this country who got up this morning to go to work, to put food on the table, to look after their kids and their families, will be appalled by that. That is why we need change. That is why we need reform, which is a party for Alarm Clock Britain, who has chosen a side. We are on the side of working people, those people who deserve our support, and we won't waste taxpayers' money in the way this government has done.
Interestingly, one of the leading pollsters in this country has said it's looking more likely than ever that Reform will win the next election.
Well, look, I hope so, obviously, Julia, and it couldn't come soon enough, because we need change. People are sick of the country being in decline. They want to turn it around, and it can be turned around, but it won't be under this Labour government, whoever leads it. It will be by Nigel Farage and a strong Reform government.
Robert Jenrick, great to get you back on the show. Come back again soon. Reform UK's Treasury spokesman. Appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. Lots more coming up. We are going to be talking more about this case. Lots of your calls coming, your reaction to this horrific body cam footage of the police. Just absolute abject failure to do anything to help Henry Novak as he lay dying. More on those Mandelson files and what we've learned. Ukraine, you name it, we're going to be talking about it. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning to you. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 3 minutes past 11 o'clock is the time. And whether you're watching on YouTube or your connected device, listening on DB Plus Radio or your smart speaker, so appreciate your time joining me today. If you've been here since 10 o'clock, you'll know we're mostly talking this morning about the Henry Novak case. Yes, I know there have been events in Ukraine overnight. Yes, I know Peter Murrell has been back in court and how he did all his invoices to embezzle money from the SNP. And yes, I know there was a mandal for some files, which, of course, all over the front pages of the newspapers, because, of course, the other stories hadn't got more detail until last night, when we did see that police body cam footage from the police who attended the scene when Henry Novak was lying, dying, blood in his mouth, having been stabbed 5 times, once crucially in the chest, which is the wound that killed him, and the lack of help from the police. You cannot watch that video without being haunted. And I would say I couldn't get to sleep last night thinking about it. But yeah, obviously it's very clear that lots of people who work at the BBC and the Sky are remarkably unbothered. And the question we're asking you today is really about what can only be blatant two-tier policing when it comes to the treatment of Henry Novak. That police footage showing that police ignored a dying knife victim's pleas for help after his attacker claimed he'd been racially abused, as if someone calling someone the P word, as awful as that is, and apparently, as was claimed by the attacker, the actual murderer, ripping off his turban in an affray, that should somehow take priority over checking whether someone had a stab wound and could be helped and call an ambulance. But that didn't happen. Is this down to two-tier policing? Is this down to an attitude within the police where, oh, a race crime is so much more important than a man being stabbed to death? And I fear, for a lot of police at that moment, that is the case. That is terrifying. I want to talk to you about that. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. Text us on 87222. Get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost 1. Standard network rate message. We're also going to be talking about that recent batch of Mandelson files published yesterday. This is apparently, we're told, the last lot we are going to see. And here's some being accused of significantly watering down disability benefit checks coming into effect from today. I mean, so they say they want to do something about people basically claiming, let's face it, claiming benefits they are not entitled to and don't need, but they don't actually do anything about it. They do the exact opposite. We're going to be talking about all of that and plenty more. But, of course, we are talking in the first instance about the murder of Henry Novak. On Friday, we had the guilty verdict from a jury for Vikram Digwa, a Sikh man, a Sikh British man who had killed him in cold blood on the street. We know what happened in that altercation because there is video footage on Henry Novak's phone. He'd filmed himself asking Vikram Digwa about his very large blade, the blade that eventually was used to kill him, where he's, oh, are you a bad man? Yes, replies Vikram, I am a bad man. He then grabs his phone, and it is after that that we see that Henry Novak gets stabbed. He is stabbed 5 times in total, but crucially 1 in his chest, which leads to his death. Now, he was chased over a fence to a neighbour's home, lying on the ground, lying on the gravel, bleeding to death, believing he was dying. It would turn out, sadly, quite rightly. A 999 call was made. You'll watch this footage, and I'll show you this footage in just a couple of moments. Police were told by the caller at 999 that there had been, well, that there'd been a racist attack. But when the police arrived, they found one man bleeding from the mouth on the ground, and another man, well, with slightly dishevelled hair. His turban, he claimed, had been pulled off. He had a slight injury, he claimed, a bruise to his eye. And yet, even while a man lay dying, saying 4 times that he had been stabbed, 9 times that he couldn't breathe, the police didn't take him seriously. Not even more than the most cursory attempt to lift his shirt more than an inch to see if he'd been stabbed in the abdomen, and telling him in the most cold-hearted way, glibly, I don't think you have, mate. And then reading him his rights and putting him his handcuffs as he was barely able to stay conscious. It is absolutely harrowing. And you can't turn away because you need to see the footage, you need to hear the footage before you can make a judgment about what the police did and didn't do. Do we have two-tier policing in this country? Well, let's play that footage to you again right now watch and have a listen, and then we'll take your calls coming up very soon, and we'll talk to Henry Hill, political editor of The Critic, about it. This is Talk.
He keeps dropping side to side, so I'm just trying to keep him set up. He's got a mouthful of blood. I don't want him. I can't breathe. He was. I can't breathe.
Grab his other arm.
What's
happened to you, right? Been stabbed. You've been stabbed? Whereabouts? I don't think you have, mate. What's your name, mate? At the moment you are under arrest, and that's for assault, so you do not have to say anything, may harm in defence. If you do not mention when questioned, someone will reach you later line of court. Anything you do say may be given in evidence, alright? It's going to be sick, I think. He's saying he's been stabbed, so let's just check him.
Where is it you think he's been stabbed?
In the face. He hasn't been.
In the face? Oh no, but we have to check, don't we?
No.
In the face?
Just get these back off, get their details on that, and I'll keep hold of him.
We have to check, don't we, whether he's been stabbed. If you're watching on YouTube, you'd have seen they lift up his shirt by about an inch. If you're listening, you wouldn't have seen that, but my goodness me, there was no proper checking. Let's talk about this with Henry Hill, political editor of The Critic. Good morning to you, Henry.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us. Again, I couldn't get to sleep last night having watched that. It was so harrowing. Don't think you have, mate. The fact that that was played in court and that Henry's family, his mother, his father, his sister, all the many other loved ones who stood outside court, his father making, Mark Novak making incredibly dignified, very, very moving statement after that sentencing of his son's killer. The fact they had to see that footage and know that their son, in his final moments, was basically being lied about, being accused of being a racist, and was not being believed by the very people who should have been there to try and help him and try and save him and handcuff him. What do you make of that?
I mean, when you sent me this link this morning saying, you know, make sure that you've seen the whole thing, it took me a little while to actually boot it up, if I'm honest. Because I'd been, like everyone else, saying that this footage should be released, but I didn't want to watch it.
Yeah.
And it was genuinely, incredibly, viscerally upsetting. And it's not gory. It's not like a picture of a car accident. It's not that. It's just imagining yourself in that position, right? And so much of it is baffling. Like, why are they cuffing him? Even assuming that everything they had been told is correct, right? And I think this is actually important because we have largely got rid of provocation as a defense for assault. So even if the racist assault had taken place, even if this man was a proven neo-Nazi with a swastika tattoo and everything else, he's barely mobile, right? Why do you cuff someone? You cuff somebody because they're at risk of running or they're at risk of hurting somebody. He is clearly none of those things. So what are they doing? Why are they handcuffing him at all? It clearly represents that they're operating on some kind of autopilot script that they've got for this. And even that script doesn't make sense. I think that's the thing that was weird.
No, and that's the thing. I spoke to police officer friends of mine who said that they've tended cases where someone has died in circumstances. They said they said they'd been stabbed. They thought that they appeared to be drunk, and I think that's what we know, that he'd had a couple of drinks. But he was legally. They did his blood levels. He was legally able to drive. That's how not drunk this man was. But you could understand them thinking he was. But again, you can think, as you say, you can think he's a neo-Nazi. You can think he's the perpetrator. You can think that he's. You can think all of those things. But you could at least check whether he's been stabbed or not and call an ambulance. Now, the pathologist in the court case, and this is clear in the judge's sentencing remarks, was very, very clear that his wounds were unsurvivable, whatever medical treatment he had got. But I think to be treated so callously in the final few moments of your life by the people you'd think, well, thank God the police are here. You know, the guy who stabbed me is here, but thank God the police are here. I'm going to be okay now. Do you at least have that hope in your final moments is what is so heartrending. Do you believe, and this is what Nigel Farage has basically said in terms of we have two-tier policing now, that actually the obsession with, and it's not racism, obsession with anti-racism in the police, the DEI concerns, the obsession with everybody being seen and judged based on their race, their religion, rather than on as individuals acting, that has meant that these two people were treated very differently. And if it had been an Asian man lying on the ground in exactly the same circumstances as Henry Novak, and it had been a white man standing there, his killer Vikram Digwa, making his claims, that this would have gone very differently.
that view, that position feels increasingly hard to dispute now. And that brings me, no great joy to say I'm a conservative. My natural instinct is to support the police, right? But I think that the sheer weight of evidence that's building up now, especially, and this isn't in the video footage, but when you hear about the fact that even after the police had finally worked out what had actually happened here, and that one man had just bled out in front of them, they didn't cuff Vikram Digwa, right? Even when he was actually under arrest for potentially manslaughter or murder, they didn't feel, and he was obviously completely compos mentis and able to run, didn't feel the need to cuff him. Apparently they treated him very nicely in the police station. And that's the kind of thing which is really what strikes to the heart of this, which I think makes it so visceral for people, is because, knife crime happens, right? Murders, all of these bad things happen. But the thing that's so chilling is the idea that even when, as you said just a moment ago, when the police arrive, right, the cavalry are here, the moment when the state, the uniformed state has arrived and you as the law-abiding citizen should finally be about to catch a break, the idea that even then, actually, they're not here for you, right? The fact that the killer, it was the killer that called the police, right? Like,
Killer's brother,
when does, like, you would,
after the weapon had been hidden by his mother.
Exactly, but instead of trying to hide the crime, hide the body, just get away from it. This boy was bleeding out, right? Can you imagine if they had just driven him somewhere and dumped him?
Yeah, but the fact that they were very clear when they were saying, "Has he been stabbed?" No, he's not been stabbed. They knew he'd been stabbed. They knew he was probably dying, and they did nothing. I mean, that's the thing: just all stand around watching a man with blood coming out of his mouth. I mean, this thing is all so. It's just so repulsive, the whole thing. And so, for want of a better phrase, blood-curdling. But, I mean, what needs to change? Because, as you say, you start from the perspective, and I think most of my audience, we would start from the perspective that, we trust the police. We'll have friends who are police officers. We've not been accused or arrested for crimes. The police are on our side. We're the law-abiding, hard-working majority. They police to keep us and our families, our businesses, our homes safe. I increasingly don't meet anyone who feels that way. And that includes, by the way, police officers who are friends of mine. And they just feel like that's not what police do anymore, and it's a very different job, and that they're not on their side, and that they will not be treated equally. What needs to change about that? And what can politicians do? Because we've had a Tory on, we've had Reform on, saying, what needs to change. But realistically, what can they do? Because it would appear to me these days, that especially after non-crime hate incidents and that the police, the Law College, the National Council of Police Chiefs, they are a law unto themselves. We've even had a police force, Gwent Police, by the way, yesterday, basically saying, we won't obey the law on single-sex spaces and things like that. They seem to think they could just do whatever the hell they want, and to hell with the consequences.
So honestly, at this point, and I'm not going to say exactly what this would involve in all the particulars, because I don't know, and it would be a very big job of work. But you need something on the scale of what happened with the Macpherson report, right? After that was a politically initiated, crucially, wholesale overhaul of the police's culture, the police's training, police's recruitment from top to bottom, right? And I think that however well-intentioned that report was, we are now living with the consequences of the system of priorities that Macpherson introduced to British policing.
Yeah.
We are now have police forces led by officers who have come up through that system. And crucially, we now have junior officers, frontline police officers, who are trained in that and have no other training, no other background. And if you're in any uniformed service, right, the internal culture, the entire point of the uniform is that you develop this powerful internal culture that helps to unite and guide the actions of all of the members in it.
Yep.
But that means if that culture goes wrong, suddenly that becomes transmitted to hundreds or thousands of people. No, I don't think anyone signs up to the police with bad intentions, right? I mean, you occasionally get criminals infiltrating it, but you're a normal person who wants to be a police officer. That's a noble calling, right? And I think everybody who joins the police deserves the benefit of the doubt. But if you go through that kind of training system and you're answerable to those senior officers and, of course, to the Independent Police Complaints Commission, which is also riddled with this sort of nonsense, as we saw when it was hounding armed police officers. What are you supposed to do?
Yeah.
Right. This is the career that you've chosen. These are the people that give you all of your instructions, from whom you're supposed to take guidance and inspiration. So you need an overhaul, a Macpherson-style overhaul, and it will probably involve clearing out senior officers. It will involve dissolving institutions and reforming institutions such as the Police Complaints Commission. Like, it is an enormous project, but it has to happen, because the one critical thing the police depend on, our unarmed police, is strong public support.
Yeah.
They don't have it, the whole model fails.
Policing by consent, and the belief that the law-abiding citizens have, as a vast majority in this country, that the police are on our side. If we don't feel they're on our side, I no longer view police in the same way as I used to, and I find that very, very, very scary. And a lot of that is about competence, but again, a lot of that is also about, you know, anyone can say anything about you, and then that takes precedence over anything, like you being a victim, let alone laying dying. Look, I also want to talk about, and again, this feels very glib to talk about. This was like the big story yesterday. It's on the front page of all the newspapers after seeing this video of Henry Novak. But we do need to cover this. And these are these Mandelson files. It's the second tranche. We're told the last tranche of Mandelson files. 1,500 pages, you know, all the journalists in Westminster sitting there rifling through, you know, page after page after page. No killer blow, no real sort of, you know, no smoking gun about what's going on, other than that we can see this litany of, you know, ministers and advisors and Mandelson all slagging off everybody and anybody. You know, criticism. I mean, quite clear. There's chaos, incompetence, and lack of leadership at the heart of this government. All the stuff that people like you and I have been accused of, basically politically accusing the government of, they're saying within their own ranks behind the scenes themselves. In terms of vetting of Peter Mandelson, I mean, very lax view of that. I mean, the level of lack of concern for our national security in terms of him getting, you know, briefings from the heads of MI5 and MI6 before we had full security vetting, I find frankly terrifying. And I think that is all for me the biggest story. But we've also got this big political story, which is we've got Pat McFadden, now the Work and Pensions Secretary, basically one of the big bruisers in government, very senior, influential figure in government. Pat McFadden, in a message exchange with Peter Mandelson, talking about how in every conversation he has with backbench Labour MPs, he says all they want to know is who can we tax in order to pay benefits to others. That is very, very telling, isn't it?
I mean, Pat McFadden is probably the one person who has come out of the Mandelson documents with an enhanced reputation. Right, you genuinely, you read these things and you just feel a little bit sorry for the man who's clearly there trying to make something work, and the rest of his colleagues are all just like, oh, can we spend more on benefits, please? Like, can we just put taxes up even more? It's like, well, the public already hate us because we've broken our promises on taxes 3 times. The Prime Minister is the most unpopular. Oh yeah, but can we just have some more taxes? But it's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, for journalists, this kind of document leak is absolutely wonderful, right? Because one thing, whatever Peter Mandelson's many failings, he is incredibly well connected and not afraid to tell people what he thinks. And so getting his insider perspective on a government that we already knew from every other source was already a shambles is very entertaining. But as you say, there's nothing in there that is a particular kind of like bear trap that's gonna destroy anybody. The most interesting thing really is how little Sir Keir Starmer features.
But there's barely any messages at all.
Right.
And of course, none from his former advisor, Morgan McSweeney. We're going to be talking to Dan Hodges later in the show, who's covered this very, very closely, Mail on Sunday commentator. But he points out crucially that Morgan McSweeney, when he gave evidence to the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, he was very clear that his message, although that phone had been stolen, his other messages still existed, and they would be published as part of this brief. Why have they not been?
I mean, that's a very good question. I wish I knew, but they haven't said yet. And presumably they will manage to cook up some kind of national security grounds, right? Because they said when they announced this, the minister read out a list of reasons, and I don't. This is a bit of a cliche reference now, but you remember that amazing Yes Minister thing where Sir Humphrey reads out the standard thing that they always say when they release any documents, and it's like excluding anything lost in the Great Fire of 1842 and And between all of these things, you can basically add up to excluding whatever you want. Yeah. But it is very nonetheless. given that not everything involving the Prime Minister will ever be national security related, it is really odd the way that Starmer is the ghost at his own feast in these reports. Like, given the role of the Prime Minister now, like historically, the Prime Minister in the dark old ages of cabinet government in the 1990s and earlier, maybe it'd make a little bit more sense if you had a sort of a chairman-like Prime Minister. But this is a modern government in which the Prime Minister is the centre of all authority. His decision, his sign-off is required for every major policy.
But apparently barely featuring any of these messages. When everyone's being pretty castigating about him, pretty negative about him, I thought one of the most telling things for me was like the utter waste of time that was spent on an awful lot of things. Peter Mandelson, apparently, according to loads of messages, his top priority before getting appointed or as a Russian ambassador was to get a ministerial red box with the presidential seal on as a gift for Donald Trump. And this was weeks and weeks of messages because he had to get the right leather and he couldn't get it in time and it was a 5-week lead time. I mean, they literally spent weeks fussing about this, talking about this. And you just think, if that is what he's spending his time doing and senior figures in Downing Street and the Foreign Office are spending their time doing, no wonder our country's in such a mess.
I mean, honestly, the saga of us giving presents to US presidents is one of the low-key, more embarrassing bits of British foreign policy, because every time it's this awful mismatch between the Foreign Office and the British government has often put an awful lot of effort in.
And no one cares.
Right. Like, but genuinely, and actually just, they are impressive gifts. They are like, this is a desk carved from the wood of some ancient historical thing related. And then the US are like, here's some DVDs.
Again, I would rather we spent less time and just bought a box set. Really good to talk to you. Henry Hill, political editor of The Critic. Thank you very much indeed. Just let you know, Yvette Cooper, the now Foreign Secretary, she has been speaking. She's in China at the moment, but she said that Lord Mandelson should never have been appointed as the ambassador to the United States. Tell us something we don't know, love. She described the messages disclosed yesterday as an unedifying process. Yeah, don't you think? Huge number of people messages simply not appearing. Lots of, disappearing WhatsApps. Should the business of government be allowed to just disappear into the ether like that? Or would many of us be rather worried about our jobs and our reputations if our private WhatsApp messages disappeared? After all, you're not keeping a record of a friendly chit-chat when you bump into someone at the coffee machine, are you? Love to hear your thoughts on that. But more importantly, of course, we're talking about Henry Novak. Going to get to your calls. Loads of calls coming in about that. Police body cam footage showing police ignored his desperate pleas for help as he told them again and again he'd been stabbed, he could not breathe, because, of course, the attacker had claimed he'd been racially abused. We'll talk about that up next. Get your calls in 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
They found a label now, Ian, which allows them to sit at home on tablets, wasting their time.
Wow.
You've got the welfare state, I've already said, wonderful thing, isn't it? but a safety net, not a way of life.
When you're talking about crimes as vicious as rape, if someone is capable of doing that, they're a threat to society.
If they don't know that all of these things are wrong, then by definition, we need them off the streets.
This is the worst one I've ever come across.
But it's where you've got with this woke, fluffy, liberal, progressive nonsense about anti-racism.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 11:28 is the time. Let's get straight to your calls. Lots of them coming in, lots of your messages as well. I think you're just as horrified as I think any normal person would be over that horrific body cam footage of Henry Novak dying, and the police just, I've been stabbed. Don't think you have, mate. Reading him his rights, handcuffing him when he was lying prone on the ground, bleeding from his mouth instead of properly checking to see if he had been stabbed, and lifting his shirt up by an inch doesn't count as a proper check. Let's talk to Scott, who is in Manchester. Hello, Scott. What do you want to say?
First of all, I just want to say how dignified Henry's father was, and Henry should be proud of his dad, and obviously Dad's proud of his son as well. I'm absolutely appalled by it. I'm so upset by it, what I've seen. There's so many things that are wrong here. I mean, the Sikh community needs to stand up now and needs to say, we're not carrying these knives.
I think there's already some talk about that. But again, vast majority of Sikh men don't do that. And by the way, this man had been thrown out of his local temple.
Okay, so the next thing I want to say, okay. So, but I don't think there's a place for knives and swords in public, full stop.
No, and the rules need to be the same for everyone. We don't want people walking around with knives. Why? Because if you've got a knife, you might use it. Oh, look, this is exactly what happened. Don't care whether it's religion, don't care, not interested, don't want people carrying them. End of.
The silence is golden from our Prime Minister and obviously his sidekick. The famous picture of him and Angela Rayner taking a knee, it really stings. Absolutely stings. And I'm absolutely appalled that they haven't stood up and said something. This is the time now.
The Prime Minister did post a post on X, and it does look like there will have to be some sort of statement in Parliament, because the Commons Speaker, Lindsay Hoyle, has basically sort of pushed there to be some sort of statement. So they may... I mean, I can't believe this isn't going to come up at PMQs tomorrow either.
But two-tier policing is here to see for everyone. You have to have your head buried deeply in the sand to see this two-tier policing. There's got to be a big inquiry into this, and it's got to be stopped. And I mean, this young man is... what even hurts even more is it's obvious to tell that he was such a nice guy.
Yeah.
This is wrong. It's scary. This country is scary now.
I agree. That's the thing. And again, I'm guessing, you're like me, we're just law-abiding, going about your day, pay your taxes, go to work, and you just assume that the authorities are on your side. And again and again and again, it just doesn't feel like it.
It certainly doesn't. And then what's the next thing when a rainbow police car comes up? Is somebody going to say, come to an assumption straight away when they get out of the police car?
Yeah. And also, the non-crime hate incidents, again, someone can say they perceived you being racist or homophobic or transphobic or whatever it is, and then that's it. I mean, I know they say it's not on your record anymore. They can still investigate you for it just because someone says something, and then there's that slur on your character. Nothing you can do about it.
So I'm obviously gobsmacked, and I want to send my love to the family, and I'm so sorry for their loss.
Absolutely.
This needs to change, and it needs to change yesterday, and it needs to change with our politicians, our leaders. Somebody needs to be really gutsy now. I know Nigel Farage says something, but there needs to be more, and it also needs to be diffused. There needs to be some commonality, and some common sense with this to stop this from happening.
Absolutely.
Losing some good people in this country.
Absolutely, Scott. Such a good call. You could be a politician. You covered all the grounds on that, but with more honesty than we get from our politicians, and more care. Joseph's online in Plymouth. Joseph, what do you want to say?
Oh, hello, Julia. First thing I want to say is I just was so sickened watching that. I've had a few friends contact me and said they couldn't sleep last night like you.
Yeah, just couldn't. I was just so haunted by it.
I don't know, there's something awful about just how helpless he is. But anyway, a key part, as an A&E nurse, as a key part of the interaction, I noted one of the diggers, I don't know who it is, says, "Oh, he hasn't been stabbed." And the police officer goes, "I know, but we have to check." Now, for me, that "I know" blatantly signals that she's already compromised by her own confirmation bias.
She's already decided I think, again, they thought he was drunk. You can tell he's slurring because he's got a lung full of blood. But they just made the assumption that he was the wrong one, didn't they?
Absolutely. And then she goes to check him and she just looks at his stomach, just like you said. And we all know that the most vital organs are much higher than that. And I just feel like this is now the end result of where all this anti-racism, DEI, white privilege nonsense soup has gotten and infected everyone, including white people, us. But as an ED nurse, we should not be thinking about all that. We should...
Irrelevant. Utterly irrelevant. And again, as someone said earlier, even if he actually was, a Nazi, he's got a swastika tattooed on his head, it doesn't matter. You still check whether he's bleeding and whether he's going to die.
Absolutely. You cut his clothes off and you look for injuries. Many times in the hospitals, a young girl once came in and she said, "I've been shot," and I didn't believe her, but I thought, I'm going to chop your clothes off. And she had a bullet lodged in between one of her ribs.
Yeah.
And from then on, I was like, it doesn't matter. You do your job.
Yeah.
Whatever you think, whatever you believe, you check.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, this would have been I'm told by many police officers, this is basic police training. Really inexcusable. Joseph, thank you very much indeed for that. We're going to take a quick break. Up next, former Met Police DCI Mike Neville's going to be live in the studio. We'll also play you what Nigel Farage had to say today. Is he stirring things up there? He's been accused by Kemi Badenoch of grandstanding over this issue. But is he right in what he's saying about two-tier policing in this country and how people should be angry about it? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the show. It's 11:37. Joined right now by Mike Neville, former Metropolitan Police Detective Chief Inspector. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Jo.
You, like all of us now, you've seen this just horrific haunting body cam footage from the police officer who arrived at the scene when Henry Novak had been stabbed to death by Vikram Digwa. His last few minutes on this planet, sadly, just, desperate, as he tells police again and again, 4 times that he's been stabbed, 9 times that he can't breathe. There is blood in his mouth. No one bothers to check properly whether he has actually been stabbed. The police clearly believe his as we now know, he's now convicted murderer, sentenced to life and 21 years minimum behind bars. That no, he hasn't been stabbed, but claims that this man has been the victim of a racist abuse and racist assault. When you watch that footage, most of us are not police officers. In terms of what the police did, it's easy now to say, well, they did everything wrong. Did they do anything wrong according to their training?
Well, my first question is, why was he handcuffed? Because you look at the two things. Digwell was never handcuffed. He was convicted of... He was never handcuffed. So the first thing, why was he handcuffed? The reason you handcuff people is, one, because they might run off, or secondly, there might be some danger to you. He was obviously unconscious. So what in God's name were they doing handcuffing him? Just that little thing alone tells me, yes, you get to a scene, it's confusing information, we can go with that.
Yeah, exactly. We're watching it with hindsight.
The handcuffing, why was it? So Digweed was arrested for murder. He wasn't handcuffed. Why was he handcuffed? That was totally unacceptable. And the fact he'd said all these things, I've been stabbed, why wouldn't you check? These are basic things. But what I've got to say, Julie, is that I looked on the Hampshire Constabulary website and found their race action plan. And these officers it would be easy to offer them up as sacrificial lambs. It's the whole system that needs tearing down.
And it's not just Hampshire Police. Well,
no, absolutely.
There's the National Police Chiefs Council and the College of Policing. They have a police race action plan, and it's all about, we were discussing it earlier, it's all about anti-racism.
Yeah, it is. Zero tolerance of racism and ensuring Hampshire Police is anti-racist and all it does. But the irony is here, our victims will be put first and treated according to their needs. So we need all these things. It
literally embeds this. They were doing... I mean,
what they're told.
They were doing what they're told. You put them first. And this is the thing. Anti-racism is not the same as not being racist, because we were all raised, were we not to be racist. The Macpherson report into the horrific stabbing to death of Stephen Lawrence. The police treated him as not mattering because he was black. That was the concern. All lives matter. Remember when you got sacked for saying all lives matter after the murder of George Floyd? But the reaction to this, politically, very different from the likes of Keir Starmer, now our Prime Minister. He was taking the knee for George Floyd. By the way, a nasty, long-term, violent villain who, yes, had been murdered in a horrific fashion by a police officer kneeling on his neck. But, you know, we got a statement 3 days after the conviction of Vikram Dugway last night from the Prime Minister. Likely he may have to be forced to answer questions about this in the House of Commons. But it really doesn't appear to be as concerned as everyone else. What do you make of Nigel Farage? Because let's play a very short clip of what Nigel Farage had to say this morning in terms of what he thinks is going on and how angry he should be about it. Have a watch and a listen.
He was actually treated in a way that meant an accusation of a racial slur was treated more seriously than an act of murder. What does he say? I can't breathe. Familiar words? Remember career criminal George Floyd, who died in appalling circumstances in Midwest America a few years ago. Remember the reaction to that and the way the police behaved. Within a few days, Keir Starmer was taking the knee. Black Lives Matter exploded all over the country. Churchill's statue was defaced, the cenotaph was vandalised. And yet, what has the public reaction been from our leaders and politicians, and indeed, to be frank, much of the media to this? Silence. Absolute silence. Proof, if ever there was any, that we're living in a two-tier culture in this country where the rights and privileges of white people matter less than those of ethnic minorities.
Now, very, very damning words from Nigel Farage there, Mike Neville. He's saying the rights and privileges of white people matter less than those of ethnic minorities, and we've got two-tier policing. Do you believe that is what happened?
I absolutely believe it. And this is not just a problem, as Nigel Farage has highlighted. It isn't just a problem for the police. This is the whole establishment. The whole establishment has spent decades now. They were determined to have a multicultural society. And what they had to do is they had to make everybody think anything they say, anything they notice that's bad, racism. Yeah. And this is the end result of it, where racism becomes more serious than stabbing, more serious than child molesting, more serious than murder. It's a whole establishment different things.
Words are violence.
Yeah, words are all this sort of thing. And what they've done is they've frightened people. So Douglas Murray calls it the crime of noticing. The fact that you notice a whole area has changed in your generation, that everything has to be condemned as racism. So people have been told, keep your mouth shut. And we're from a different generation where we were brought up with the Martin Luther King idea. You know, I was the Bible, judge the heart, not the outward appearance. All this, that's how we were brought up. These young officers who went to that scene, they've been bombarded with this stuff throughout their school, and then it's been exacerbated by the police training, which is, you know, rather than learning the definition of theft and burglary and robbery and how to spot a villain, you're taught diversity, brainwash, everything. Oh, white people are bad.
And that's what the critical race theory and anti-racism is based on. This isn't Tommy Robinson talking. This is based on the theory that it's about the oppressor and the oppressed, and by definition, white people are automatically the oppressors and automatically racist, and that black people or anyone of colour is a victim. And if you start from that perspective, by definition, you are not policing without fear or favour. And this is the crucial thing. We have policing by consent in this country. We don't have, like in America, and you see this in all the Hollywood movies, everyone wandering around with their guns. Vast majority of our police officers aren't armed, even less now, when we've had these outrageous prosecutions. The vast majority of people who are law-abiding, they go out to work, they pay their taxes. There are still a majority of people doing that, getting smaller by the minute. Just, you know, even if you're on benefits, but, you know, you're law-abiding. You know, they just expect that when the police turn up, they are on their side as a law-abiding citizen. Given that most people's interaction with police now is probably like watching them not arresting a shoplifter or you know, a police fine for speeding at 22 miles per hour on a main street. It's got a 20 mile per hour zone. A lot of people just feel like the police aren't on their side.
They're not. I spoke, Jill, I went to a reform meeting and I was asked to speak about policing, and the people there were sort of your average couple, you know, couples, ex-veteran, ordinary people. And I said, who trusts the police? And not one of them put their hands on.
They would be a group that you would expect would all
20 years
100%.
ago, they would have done. And what we've had a succession of senior officers who've had this wonderful idea. They told, when I was in, I remember being told, oh, if we recruit more black people, if we recruit more Asian people, more gay people, more this, more that, judging people by their appearance, the trust and confidence will go up. Well, they've done all this.
How's that working?
We've got, that's right, we've got the police forces as envisaged by Harriet Harman, and now it's the trust and confidence is at rock bottom. The police used to be trusted by vast majority.
I think there's a perfectly good argument for having, you know, more people from different ethnic minorities and different religious groups.
Just good people.
Just good people. No, but not hired because of that, but just sort of, you know, having different viewpoints and perhaps people in situations where they can perhaps be more trusted by. We know we've had an issue for many years in terms of trust in the police from certain particular ethnic and religious communities. And again, there have been problems in the past. There are racist people in every walk of
Julia,
life.
The reason part of that was the dishonesty about hiding the crime statistic. The police officers cannot help who commits crime.
Oh, I mean, the obsession with the fact that more young black people are stopped for stop and search, that's because stop and search is largely done in inner city areas, and the vast majority of black people in this country do actually live in inner city areas, the vast majority. And in terms of street crime, where you would be wanting to stop and search, there is a hugely different discrepancy between the number of people of different backgrounds who are doing it. And also, when you do these figures of 9 times more likely to be arrested, that is comparing, you know, a young black 16-year-old from a sink estate in Brixton, with, you know, or Tottenham, with a 16-year-old lad who lives in the rural Devon. Well, funnily enough, they're not doing stop and search out there because they haven't got a load of armed robberies on the street. I mean, it's silly. Those stats are completely misleading. Here's the thing. What do we need to do? Because the Macpherson report into Stephen Lawrence, that had a change of culture. That was supposed to, you know, lead to things change. Lots of people are saying the pendulum needed to swing, but it swung way in the opposite direction, and that's just as dangerous. That we need policing without fear or favour. We want just people to be judged on their actions and their words, to be trusted equally or mistrusted equally by the police, not based on the colour of their skin or anything else they cannot change about themselves. And for actions, violent actions, to be judged more harshly than someone saying a bad word or even being accused and having not actually done it. What needs to change? Do we need to go so far as, I mean, root and branch, as in National College of Policing, gone. taking out this, retraining everybody, removing a load of these chief constables, because you did not get a job as a chief constable in the last 20 years unless you signed up to your rainbow, your Black Lives Matter, you're taking the knee, your rainbow shoelaces.
I saw them. There were people. I was a DCI for half my service. I saw people who were chief inspectors, superintendents, along with me. They would sell their soul, kill their grandmother for the net. They would sign up for anything, and this is what what it needs is strong government. It needs so every diversity target in the police needs to be scrapped, got rid of. The police need to be told your job is to catch criminals. The fact that you're solving 1% of thefts is utterly rubbish. You need to sort this out. Remove people if need be. What we had with these police and crime commissioners, you had this ridiculous situation where you voted somebody in who was but he wasn't in charge.
Well, was supposed to be representing the people.
It wasn't the chief. So if need be, like America, vote in the chief constable, so we can say we've had enough of this left-wing nonsense. We want somebody who's going to arrest criminals. And we don't care what colour or sexuality or whatever. An officer who's in charge. We want rid of all this, but it will take real effort because it's like every part of the establishment. They've riddled it. They've riddled it.
Do you trust this government to do anything about this?
Nothing.
Because given that we've got defence contracts being based on whether or not you've proven your DEI credentials.
This government will do nothing. They'll do it even worse. If you vote for the Labour Party, you get what you've got. If you really do that, and the nonsense of all this white privilege and all this. Well, if somebody can tell me where it is, I'll go back to the Bolton Council House where I was born and I'll go and find it. It's all nonsense, but it's insidious. It's everywhere. Whatever government comes in, though, the civil service is riddled with it. You'd be better to say to civil service, take your money, go home, and do not come in, because what they'll do, they don't assist, they hinder. They'd be better just sending them all home and doing all the work yourself.
This is the thing. This is about one man, a victim. This is about a couple of police officers, but it's not. It's about the whole police.
It's whole society.
It's about the whole. It's about the whole of our governing class. Yeah. The fact that we've got loads of conversations still now. Look, we were planning to talk about Mandelson and those messages and what we found out and things for most of the show today. There was a lot of that, and then we had the Ukraine bombing. The fact that BBC, Sky, ITV are all obsessed still with a tittle-tattle on that bombing, horrific events in Ukraine. I get that, but they're not focusing on this. I know for a fact, I know people who work at those stations, if this had been an Asian or a black man, particularly a black man, if he'd been on the ground in that scenario and the police had acted in that way, this would be every hour, all day for the next 2 weeks, and it would have been following it, barely getting a mention.
Two-tier society. We live in a two-tier...
It's two-tier policing, two-tier government, two-tier civil service, two-tier two-tier media, two-tier, as you say, two-tier society.
It is absolutely insane. I mean, this poor old Henry Novak. If anything, the tragedy of that young man's death, let's hope it, change comes. But I really can't see it because, as you say, they just simply do not want to change. They've got a plan. I always say that. I say this on Mark Dolan's show. The left, they never sleep. They're absolutely determined to have this multicultural society, and anybody who challenges it will be. They'll try and shut us down.
Well, I'm telling you right now, all the people we're talking about think that even having this conversation just means we're both bigots.
Oh, of course it does.
And you are as well, for watching and listening and agreeing. 11:50 is the time. Mike Neville, always great to have you in. I know you always talk sense. You always speak your mind. Former Met Police Detective, Chief Inspector. I wish Henry Novak had you come to the scene on that fateful night. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to be talking to Justin Urquhart-Stewart up next. This is Talk.
they found a label now, Ian, which allows them to sit at home on tablets, wasting their time.
Wow.
You know, you've got the welfare state, I've already said, wonderful thing, isn't it? But a safety net, not a way of life.
When you're talking about crimes as vicious as rape, if someone is capable of doing that, they're a threat to society.
If they don't know that all of these things are wrong, then by definition, we need them off the streets.
This is the worst one I've ever come across.
But it's where you've got with this woke, fluffy, liberal, progressive nonsense about anti-racism.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning. Welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the home of common sense. 11:53 is the time. We're joined now by Justin Urquhart-Stewart. He's an economist and chairman of the Regionally Investment Platform. Good morning to you.
Morning, Julia.
Obviously, lots of different stories taking priority today, but I do want to talk to you, actually, just about where we are in the economy. Just first, I want to ask you about that extraordinary remark made in a message to Lord Mandelson by the now Work and Pension Secretary, who said that, you know, whenever he talks to Labour MPs, they ask, who can we tax in order to pay benefits to others? That ties in rather well with the former M&S chairman, who says that Britain has rarely been this anti-growth, doesn't it?
Absolutely, because the one way you get more tax is to create more wealth. Where do you get more wealth from? For creating more businesses. And that way you're employing more people, therefore they're not on claiming benefit and whatever, and they're probably paying tax. So good, you've got more people contributing and less people actually taking money out of the state. Yeah. This actually isn't very difficult. So the head of M&S was absolutely right. Create the environment where we can create more businesses. We've done it before. Yeah. We don't need shed loads of money. There's no shortage of money to do this. There's lots of investment money, but we haven't got either a government understanding how to actually finance businesses, and you do that by with guarantees. You need to put up, don't get government investing in businesses, let alone actually nationalising them. So actually create the environment where people are willing to take the risk. And it is a risk because your house is on the land, your family's on the land, all those things, by taking that bet. So give them some encouragement by way of enterprise investment schemes, whatever they are.
Yeah. And also things like, you know, the capital gains tax and things like directors, you know, lower tax rates when you have a successful company. And people go, oh, well, these people are wealthy. They forget all the people who, again, lost their homes, or the first two businesses went under, who didn't get paid for 2 years while they lived in their car while they were trying to set up their business. I correct myself, actually. It wasn't even the former chairman of M&S. It was Archie Norman, the current boardroom chief, who's highly respected. But this is it. How many top business people do we need to tell this government this isn't how you create growth? They said, I mean, remember those 2 years ago, those heady days when they were talking about how their steely focus on growth? We don't have growth. They point to some figures, some comparisons with other countries and say, until the war in Iran, everything was going fine. I mean, it wasn't going fine.
Unfortunately, it's very difficult when you've got people, whether it's from the Greens or the left-wing Labour Party, anyone who's a capitalist or involved in anything like city or finance, we've got horns on. And therefore, they're not to be trusted, as opposed to people who actually will be helping to make money. Yeah. And, you know, suddenly there's this issue that money's a dirty word, and it's just actually, how can you create more of it without actually...
But also, this does come a very left-wing attitude, this idea that somehow people are wealthy, people have made money, it's undeserved, and that they've done it at the expense of other people, as opposed to someone makes something that we want to buy at a price we're willing to pay, and then they make money from it. And you just think, surely we should be encouraging that. But that doesn't seem to be the attitude, certainly of a lot of Labour backbenchers, and I would say, frankly, a lot in the Labour cabinet as well. And this is the thing.
They haven't practiced it. They haven't run a businesses.
They haven't run a business. But the thing is, I've never run a business in that way, but I do. My husband runs an IT business, and I'm in awe. And again, talking to him about, you know, how you... And a lot, again, it seems to be no Labour minister or MP seems to have actually spoken to someone who runs a business, whether it's a multi-million-pound business or a small family business or corner shop. You know, literally, how, you know, what does it cost you to employ someone? What does that cost you in terms of their wages, the national insurance, the cost, the paperwork? What do you have to pay an employment agency? What matters to you? They don't seem to know or care about the basics. And yet, vast majority of people in this country don't work for your M&Ss. They don't work for companies any of us have ever heard of. They work in small businesses.
Yeah, but now we're in a position, of course, where we are very, very slowly heading towards, and this is something I hate doing, looking towards some really difficult times.
Yep.
This is a very slow accident occurring. There is going to be more inflation going through because of what's happening in the Gulf.
And that makes everyone poorer.
Makes everyone poorer, and that's also going to impact in terms of fertilizer, helium, those issues coming out of the Gulf as well. And that's apart from having a couple of wars going on around the world. All of those elements are building up more tension, getting people to say, I don't want to take risk because I can see what's happening here. And so you're seeing the global economy slowing down. Yeah. So therefore, you've got to make sure you're living within your means. And look at the figures now. We're actually now paying out more in social protection than we're getting in income tax.
Well, you say social protection in benefits. Now, there's pensions and people, you know, Robitaille anyone, even though it's unaffordable, the triple lock on pensions, and everyone who pays attention knows it is, in terms of the growing pensioner population, that is politically, I would say, untouchable. But then you've got millions of working age people who are not working, either unemployed, not really looking for work, or on some sort of, you know, PIP on their disability benefits, who, I'm sorry, there's just no evidence that the vast majority of these people are in need of it.
No, and so what you have to do is incentivise, and this is not just government, 'cause it's so easy just being government, push it down locally. So areas saying, right, how do I, in the northeast of England, make sure I've got money going to the right areas here to actually bring down our unemployment and claims benefit there? Because then it becomes personal, because then you're sitting there in your own little region. How can we afford to sustain the economy like this? Oh, gosh, we can't do it. We're going to have to do something ourselves. If you blame it on ministers who don't know anything about it anyway, or civil servants who, again, who've had no real practical experience, then you're giving yourself
what's going to happen.
Excuses.
Absolutely. We'll have to leave it there. Justin Urquhart-Stewart, economist and chairman, Regionally Investment Platform. Thank you, as always, for joining us. Coming up, we're going to get to the top of the hour. Up after that, we are going to be talking, of course, more about this horrific Henry Novak police body cam footage. We're also going to be talking to Dan Hodges up next about the Mandelson files, what we did learn. How should the Prime Minister handle this? Is he, well, you know, he's already a dead man walking, a dead man crawling. Does this damage him anymore? And what did we actually learn? And how much more has been hidden? All of that coming up. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon to you. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. It's 2 minutes past midday, and whether you're listening on DAB Plus radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, thank you so much for your company. If you missed anything of the show today, and you really shouldn't have, I'm really going to tell you that. I really think so many people have said so many really important things that we need to listen to. Do go to my YouTube page, the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. If you hit subscribe, you never have to miss a thing. Coming up in this hour, we are going to be talking more about that horrific police body cam footage of Henry Novak as he lay dying after being stabbed to death by Vikram Digwa. In his final moments on this earth, conscious, were basically being told by a police officer as he lay dying, telling the police officers again and again that he couldn't breathe and that he had been stabbed. I don't think you have, mate, was the response back to him as he was handcuffed and read his rights. We're going to be talking more about that and, well, the accusations that we do live in a society with two-tier policing, and it has to change. We're also going to discuss more on the most recent batch of Mandelson files published yesterday, more than 1,500 pages of documents showing Peter Mandelson refusal to hand over WhatsApp messages relating to his time as the UK ambassador to the US. How come he's allowed to do that? We'll talk about that. Plus, we're going to be talking about new research suggesting that a third of people now think a university degree isn't worth the time and money. Well, no wonder many of them think that. Right, well, in a couple of moments, we are going to be talking to Dan Hodges. He's a commentator at the Mail on Sunday and has been, well, very much to the forefront of a lot of the stories regarding the Mandelson files, Morgan McSweeney, his messages and the like. We'll talk to him about that in a few moments. But first up, let's just talk a little bit more about the murder of Henry Novak. On Friday, Vikram Digwa was convicted by a jury of the murder last December of the 18-year-old student who he had accused of basically abusing him, getting into an attack on him, involving him his turban being knocked off. Vikram was a Sikh man, or is a Sikh man. But in fact, everything that Vikram Digwa had told police, had told the courts, was a complete and utter lie. In fact, he was the perpetrator. Henry Novak was an innocent man and cruelly slurred as he lay dying. The police arrived on the scene, and there is no doubt at all that the footage, and we'll play it again in this hour, from the body cam footage, which we finally got released after the sentencing to life behind bars with a minimum of 21 years for Vikram Digwa, that footage is absolutely harrowing. I've been saying, and I know a lot of you messaging me to say, you couldn't sleep after watching the footage. It is so haunting, so awful and haunting, as he says again and again. 4 times that he had been stabbed. He was bleeding from his mouth. He had his mouth full of blood, and yet the police made the most cursory search. I mean, they lifted his shirt up by about an inch. I'm not even joking, by about an inch. Didn't look for the stab wound, and 9 times he said that he couldn't breathe before he lost consciousness. In that time, he was read his rights and arrested, and he was handcuffed completely unnecessarily. There no doubt will be a police investigation into this, but Nigel Farage and many others are saying this is about two-tier policing, plain and simple. This is about people being treated differently, being believed, being treated as victims or perpetrators based on the colour of their skin. He says we should be very angry about it. I want to hear your thoughts. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate and text cost 1 standard network rate message. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Lots of calls coming in. First up, though, as I say, let's talk to Dan Hodges, commentator for the Mail on Sunday. A very good afternoon to you, Dan.
Hi.
Good. Thank you for joining us. I do want to ask you just first, I want to talk about the Mandelson files. That's what we invited you on to talk about. But, you will not have not noticed this, the just huge outcry over this police footage, the body cam footage that everyone had demanded was released. We were never going to see it released until after there was a guilty verdict last Friday, but finally released last night from the police in Hampshire, showing just how casual the police were with Henry Novak as he lay dying. The accusation from the likes of Nigel Farage and others is that basically this is the evidence, as if we needed any more, that we do have two-tier policing and proof that we need to take action. And we live in two-tier Britain, says Nigel Farage. He says we need an end to anti-white prejudice and a recognition that white lives matter. And he says he wants the public to respond with pure, cold rage. Is he right?
No, he isn't. I mean, the response that there should be to this incident is the response should be guided, in my view, by the statement that was made by Henry Novak's father yesterday on the steps of the court, in which he gave frankly, a heartrending and an incredibly composed response to the conviction, but was very clear that he didn't want his son's death to be exploited in a narrow political sense, although obviously he is desperate, as others are, for the lessons to be learnt from this case, and some of them are obviously going to be quite significant and serious lessons. But I think in the response of all of us to this, we should primarily and initially be guided by the response of those who have been affected by this tragedy the deepest. And excuse me, and frankly, I don't think Nigel Farage has done that in his response.
I think we can all applaud the dignity of the family, but I think after the Southport riots, after Nottingham killer, the grooming, the handling of the grooming gangs, a lot of people are saying, look, enough is enough. I mean, and these incredibly dignified family members who are grieving, in sorrow rather than in anger. I think other people are entitled to say, well, I'm angry about this.
Well, as I said, my view is, those of us who are not been directly affected by this tragedy should initially take some guidance from those who have. And my own view is, as I say, I don't think Nigel Farage has struck the right tone with his statement this morning.
Has Keir Starmer?
To be perfect, I haven't seen Keir Starmer say anything.
He hasn't. Well, that's it. He hasn't said anything. He has issued a statement last night on social media. I mean, it's not doesn't particularly say anything. But what's very interesting, of course, a few years ago, in 2020, he was taking the knee, wasn't he?
No, and I think the criticism of sort of Keir Starmer's sort of broader silence on this is legitimate, given the national interest and national sort of concern there is about this case. I think, but I'm going to be completely honest. I mean, Keir Starmer is Prime Minister in name only. He's not going to be Prime Minister for much longer. So, frankly, I'm less interested in his responses than those of the politicians who are going to be around for much longer. The one thing I would like to say, though, because we are sort of name-checking everybody, the person who I was impressed by, I thought Kemi Badenoch, who I saw her on TV this morning, and I thought she struck precisely the right tone in which she did express and articulate the concerns a lot of people are feeling around this case, but did so in a very respectful and dignified way.
Yeah,
and I think
she did say, she accused Nigel Farage of grandstanding and says, I'm not taking sides, Nigel Farage is taking sides, I'm saying enough of this, we need to stop this racialising of our society, we are multiracial, yes, but we need to stop using race as a way of defining laws, as a way of hiring people, let's treat everyone equally, no two-tier policing, no believing that racism only happens to ethnic minorities, it happens to everyone. I mean, yeah, absolutely. I could absolutely 100% agree with that. Look, let's move on. You made the very fair point then. The Prime Minister is Prime Minister in name only. I know you are following, as you've done for many months now, this Mandelson affair very, very, very closely. We saw the second, and we're told last tranche of documents published by the government as a result of that vote by MPs. And many say, well, forced by Tories. Well, actually Labour MPs are the ones who voted for it en masse as well, into who made the decision and why to appoint Peter Mandelson as our ambassador to the US, and why that decision was made and what vetting was done, etc., etc. Ostensibly, we didn't learn very much new in terms of, or anything new particularly damaging in terms of, there was no smoking gun of, aha, this is what happened. But what did we learn from those revelations yesterday?
Well, we kind of learned what I thought we'd learn, which was we didn't learn, as you say, much in terms of smoking gun. But the reason we didn't learn much in terms of smoking gun is the relevant documents and messages and emails have been disappeared, frankly. I mean, that was the key thing I read about my column in the Daily Mail this morning. There's been some concern, and I've been articulating, others have been articulating about whether effectively there would be a cover-up in relation to the Mandelson documents. we don't need to debate the issue anymore, because we can see the cover-up. I mean, you read the documents, I read the documents. You saw the extensive redactions that were included in the documents. Some obviously would have related to sensitive issues, but there were redactions of documents which were basically discussions about media plans and things like that. So it obviously went well beyond what was required for
and we
national
were told
security.
it was if there was a national security issue, and that's why these documents were all going to this highly placed, security vetted committee in the House of Commons, who were going to look at it, and they were going to, they'd see everything and they would judge. But it appears that the Cabinet Office has kind of already prejudged.
Somewhere throughout the process, it's quite clear that redactions were made that were not necessary purely for national
but there's also just a lot missing. I mean, it's quite bizarre. We've got quite a lot of messages between certain ministers and Peter Mandelson. A lot of it is just gossipy tittle-tattle and frankly, people, criticising their boss or their colleagues. Mandelson basically, for want of a better expression, bitches about everybody, but that's what he's always done. He thinks he's, the God giving judgment handing down from heaven. But it was very noticeable, where are all the messages between the Prime Minister and Peter Mandelson? And crucially, something you've been tackling an awful lot, covering all those committee hearings we had with the likes of Morgan McSweeney, the Prime Minister's former Chief of Staff, who had one of his phones stolen famously on the street. And yet, where were his messages? We were told categorically by him, were we not, that his messages, there were a number of, on other phones, that those messages were still available. They were not disappeared on disappearing messages, and that they would be published as part of this next tranche. Where were they?
Well, exactly. I mean, and that's why I'm making the point about there's no longer a debate. And if you like, the cover-up is proven because, as you accurately say, when Morgan McSweeney was in front of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee at the end of April, he was specifically asked by the committee chair, Emily Thornberry, a series of questions relating to the story that had circulated that Peter Mandelson had been in Downing Street on the 5th of September, on the day the reshuffle occurred, and had attempted to influence the reshuffle. And in his evidence, and it's there, people can see it on video, McSweeney is very clear. He talks about how Mandelson was in the building, but was in a separate part of the building, but Mandelson was messaging him, sending him texts. He responded with his own messages and explicitly said to the committee those messages would be published. Now, that is crucial for two reasons. Firstly, as you say, we've heard a lot about disappearing messages. We've heard about the fact that McSweeney's official mobile was stolen. But his evidence there was clear that he was communicating with Peter Mandelson, but with a mobile phone on a device in which disappearing messages had not been utilised, because he quoted from one of the messages that he sent to Mandelson and explicitly said that that message and other messages and messages from Mandelson to him would be published. I mean, he said it in black and white, and they were.
There could be no national security issue related to that.
There's no national security issue relating to how Peter Mandelson, and obviously it's quite clear what we can see from the other messages, the extent to which Peter Mandelson had his hooks across the Downing Street operation. I mean, it's pretty clear Mandelson would have been having sort of, sticking his oar in on the reshuffle. The idea that any of that relates to national security or diplomatic niceties is obviously for the birds. I mean, and as I say, that's where, if you like, I mean, people are saying there's not a smoking gun. That was the smoking gun. I mean, the way I phrased it was, to use the Sherlock Holmes phrase, it was the dog that didn't bark.
Yeah.
It's the absence of the messages. It's the absence of the documents. It's the absence of the memos. That is most...
But exactly, but also the absence of Lord Mandelson's personal messages relating to his time as UK ambassador. There's a document in there showing, that he, in a statement from the Cabinet Office, on the 31st of March, the Cabinet Office wrote to Peter Mandelson via his solicitors to request any information held on his personal phone. Peter Mandelson declined to comply with this request. The government has no further recourse to search the personal devices of Peter Mandelson. Now, We know that there's a police investigation, and obviously that cannot be, well, we're not going to prejudice the investigation, as the police suggest. We could prejudice a future trial, and we don't want to do that. He's been under arrest and questioned, and is facing investigation over his actions, which have been alleged as a result of the Epstein files being published in America, rather more fully than these files we had this week in Westminster, where we alleged that there was wrongdoing in public office back when he was a minister in Gordon Brown's government in 2009. Quite a completely separate affair. But presumably, I mean, the police have got the right to see these documents, to see what's on his phone. That we know that an awful lot of, computer equipment and documents were seized from his home when he was taken for questioning by the police a few months ago. But it is extraordinary, I think, that a Commons ordered, under a humble address demand for this information, that Peter Mandelson is not required to produce his messages.
Well, I mean, it's obviously completely ridiculous. But as I said, it's not just Peter Mandelson. Where are the Morgan McSweeney messages? Yeah. I mean, at least we have some messages from Peter Mandelson to other individuals.
Because of that, we've got theirs.
Do not have a single message from Morgan McSweeney. And actually, for me, the biggest glaring hole in all of this is what was it that the Commons primarily asked for? They primarily asked for the communication that related to the period preceding, obviously following, but crucially preceding Mandelson's appointment. This wasn't just some minor job.
Yeah.
It was the most sensitive post in the British diplomatic service, with huge implications, obviously, for foreign policy, our relationship with the United States, security. We've had the whole thing about the vetting and the farrago that was there, and the sensitivities of the information Peter Mandelson was going to be seeing. This was one of the most important appointments Keir Starmer was going to make as Prime Minister. And the country's being led to believe that at no stage did Morgan McSweeney, did Keir Starmer, did any of Starmer's senior aides put down in writing anything at all in relation to this appointment.
Yeah.
No minutes of meetings, no shortlists, no discussions of the pros and cons, absolutely nothing. We're meant to believe there was absolutely nothing at all in relation to this.
It just does not pass the smell test, does it?
Remember, this Prime Minister who we were told is very forensic. He was head of the CPS, did everything by the book, crossed his T's, dotted his I's. And they seriously expect us to believe there was nothing there. Of course there's stuff there. Of course there are messages.
And we know that...
Of course there are memos. They're just not going to give them to us because they know what they'll show.
From what we've seen in the documents published yesterday, I've got even more concerns about the security vetting. Yet again and again, it's made really clear no one passed on to anybody that he'd failed his security vetting. For some reason, that itself was a state secret when this was the most relevant fact, given that this man was going to have the highest level vetting. He got security briefings from the head of MI5 and MI6 before he'd even had his full vetting, which is extraordinary. And the national security issues of that, I think, are absolutely huge. A lot of people saying, look, this is about the victims of Jeffrey Epstein. No, it's not. No, it's not. This is about hypocrisy from the Prime Minister pretending to care about these things when he doesn't really. We know that from the grooming gangs. That was just geography, the difference between those two groups. But it's the absolute abject lack of concern for national security over these political preferences. But let me ask you about one more thing. And this is, a lot of the papers have got this on the front page. This is the big sort of political damage that's been done. We know from all these messages, frankly, what you and I, and anyone who's got eyes and ears has been saying for the last couple of years, this is a government that is rudderless, leadershipless. They've got no policy, they've got no plan, they've got no philosophy, they've got no ideology, they don't know what they're doing. U-turn after U-turn, hopeless, absolutely running around like headless chickens and not getting anything done. That's blatantly obvious. What is clear from these messages is that's pretty much what everyone within government was thinking too, but also crucially, we found out what Labour backbenchers really do think from Pat McFadden, the now Work and Pensions Secretary, hugely important figure in this government, very much, the government enforcer, very close to the Prime Minister over recent years. And he, in a message exchange with Peter Mandelson, had said the problem he's got is every time he has a conversation with Labour MPs, all they want to know is, who can we tax? He said, this is the quote, who can we tax in order to pay benefits to others? This was leapt on by the Tories and others as, evidence this is the benefits party. I have a very funny feeling. Lots of people are saying this is the equivalent to that infamous message left by Liam Byrne when he left office in 2010 saying, I'm afraid there is no money at the Treasury. This is going to come back to haunt this government, isn't it?
Yes, and I was actually saying to some friends today, there's a great irony that Pat, who is one of the most sort of sober, sort of taciturn members of Keir Starmer's government, is now sort of, as you say, the new Liam Byrne, and his words will now be splashed on election posters and adverts and campaign material from now until the end of Labour's time in office. I mean, what I would say is, in one sense, Pat McFadden was not saying anything that I don't think anybody knew. No. Labour MPs do not like benefit cuts, and we know that. I mean, the great irony is, I do think once Keir Starmer goes, whoever replaces him, this issue of welfare is now such a key issue, and there's so much focus on it. They're going to have no option but to sort of grasp the nettle in some way.
Good luck with that.
I would also say, in relation to Pat, is Pat McFadden is obviously all over the papers. But that's because Pat McFadden, almost uniquely from what I saw yesterday, is the one cabinet minister who was honourable enough to actually do what Parliament asked.
Yes.
And did actually pass over
all his messages,
his communications, unredacted, unedited, unexpedited, in full, as Parliament had demanded. Now, what I want to know is, where are all the others?
Yeah.
Right? But Peter Mandelson, now obviously he as I say, he had his hooks in everything. But Peter Mandelson ostensibly was supposed to be our Washington ambassador. Where are the messages between Peter Mandelson and the Foreign Secretary?
Yeah.
I didn't see one yesterday. Where are the messages between Peter Mandelson and the Business Secretary, Peter Kyle, a close friend of his, close political ally of his, somebody who we know he was liaising with a lot about business policy? Where are his messages? I've seen Pat's messages, I've seen Wes Streeting's messages. I think Torsten Bell's messages popped up a bit, and that's it.
Yeah.
Where are all the rest of them? And so, everybody's having a good laugh at Pat McFadden's expense this morning, but at least he, as I say, uniquely was a minister who was actually prepared to say, OK, this is what Parliament's asked for, this is what I'm going to give them.
It's a very, very fair point, Dan. I really appreciate you joining us. I'm sure there's going to be more to come on all of this. I'm sure this, and of course the other topic, I think for most people much more important today, the Henry Novak case, is going to come up certainly in Commons in the next couple of days. But Dan Hodges, commentator for the Mail on Sunday, thank you very much indeed for joining us. I'd love you to get in touch. If you want to pass comment on the Mandelson files, you're welcome to. I know that's what we thought we were going to be talking a lot about today, and a bit on Peter Murrell, and more we found out in court today about how the former chief exec of the SNP was basically embezzling 400 grand's worth of funds, and apparently his wife had no idea. But you know and I know it's the Henry Novak case that is really dominating today. And I think it's not just dominating news and stories, certainly on our station, maybe not on the BBC, of course not. It's the BBC. It's the BBC. Henry Novak's the wrong colour victim. You know why it's not dominating on the BBC. But I think it's not just dominating in the news. I think it's just dominating in our hearts. I think it's dominating in our, in our souls, in our consciences. There's just something so haunting and so scary about that video, that cold video from the police attending him as he lay bleeding to death. I want to hear your reactions to all that. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. We'll get your calls up next.
they found a label now, Ian, which allows them to sit at home on tablets, wasting their time.
Wow.
You know, you've got the welfare state, I've already said, wonderful thing, isn't it? But a safety net, not a way of life.
When you're talking about crimes as vicious as rape, if someone is capable of doing that, they're a threat to society.
If they don't know that all of these things are wrong, then by definition, we need them off the streets.
This is the worst one I've ever come across.
But it's where you've got with this woke, fluffy, liberal, progressive nonsense about anti-racism.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. Let's get straight to your calls and your messages. I haven't really got out to the messages. We had so many fantastic calls from you. I say fantastic. I sound like I'm being as glib as the police officer say, don't think you have, mate, when a man is dying in front of him, telling him he's been stabbed and he can't breathe. Let's go to Paul, who's in Cardiff. Hello, Paul. Oh, apologies. We just dropped the line on Paul. Let's go to Melissa, who's in Cambridge. Hello, Melissa.
Oh, good morning, Julia. Thanks for taking my call.
Thank you for getting in
Sorry. I watched that heroin video like you. It made me feel physically sick.
Yeah.
When I watched it with my husband, I said to him, the first thing I noticed, I went, look at his hands. Look at the colour of his hands. Look at his fingertips. And then when they looked at his stomach, the very short part of the stomach...
No, they looked at an inch of his stomach, just above his belt. I mean, you know...
and that was white as well. You could clearly see that. I know it was dark, but you could clearly see his hands were white.
I don't think it's dark, got the cameras on. I think what you see in a body cam footage, I don't think that would be the giveaway. The giveaway was his mouth was full of blood.
Yes.
They'd already been told that. I mean, there was blood.
When they
just lift up his jumper.
Read his pulse. They would have known straight away. You know, it'd have been a weak pulse.
They thought he was drunk. And he sounded drunk. And again, a police officer friend of mine said he's been to a scene exactly the same where someone was saying they were stabbed, but everyone just thought they were drunk.
But they needed to check him properly, and they didn't do that. They did not do a thorough check. They should have done a thorough check on him, top to toe.
Yeah. Because, I mean, again, he wasn't a threat. He wasn't trying to fight them. He didn't have a weapon.
He couldn't have run away. Look at him.
Yeah.
He couldn't have run anywhere.
Do you put this down to just poor training, you know, police officers' inexperience? I mean, the police I spoke to have all said they may be inexperienced. Or do you put this down to they made a judgment, an Asian man had said that he'd been the victim of a racist attack, and they just saw him a certain way?
Straight to that. They went straight to that. They didn't even look at the situation as a whole, in my opinion. They just went straight to the racism and didn't give a damn about that poor boy on the floor who you could clearly see from any normal person with no medical training whatsoever. No medical training. That boy was dying.
Yeah. I know, and it's when the WPC says, you know, he's been stabbed. No, he's not been stabbed. Says the man who has stabbed him, and then the WPC says, well, we have to check, and then she doesn't check. That's the absolutely heart-wrenching thing.
She said, I've got to check, and I'm like, well, check.
She just lifted his jumper up all the way. Yes. She would have seen the blood.
Surely they have training about this. Yep. Surely they have training on how to see someone when they're actually in this type of need, that they need this, you know, ambulance or something, you know.
I mean, it's absolutely harrowing. And again, and the father of Henry Novak, his father, Mark Novak, incredibly, I mean, moving statement outside court, made it very clear they only hold one man responsible for his death. This is Vikram Digwa, his assailant, who's now behind bars, thank goodness. Again, I don't understand why he can't be told you're behind bars forever. I mean, he literally, you know, videoed him after knowing he'd stabbed him in the chest and showed no concern, denied to the police he'd been stabbed when perhaps help could have happened. Pathologist in the case, though, heard in court, did say that those wounds were unsurvivable. So even if there had been help for Henry Novak on the scene, that would have comforted him in his final moments, but sadly would not have saved him. Does that make any difference to you?
reassurance. There was no care,
kindness,
emotion, kindness, empathy. There was nothing towards him whatsoever. Those police officers, they should be ashamed of themselves. When they go to bed at night, I hope they're seeing his face, and also his family, they should be ashamed of themselves as well.
Oh, yeah.
They are as much responsible, trying to hide the weapon, trying to make out like he was drunk, disgusting. And then they're to actually shout out in court, you're racist to the family.
So you're right, that's something we didn't have, even after the conviction and the sentencing, they were still perpetrating that lie. And there were cries from other people in the court saying, stop, just stop. Because, this is such a lie that there's simply no evidence at all that there was any evasion.
Every time I watch it.
Do you feel this is two-tier policing, though? Do you think that if the two men's races had been swapped over, do you think there would have been a different outcome?
All they look at now is colour. All they look at now is colour. They don't look about what the crime is and what's involved and who's hurt or who's been raped, who's been stabbed.
Yeah.
They don't look at that. They just look at colour. Straight away, it's the white person's fault. They're far right. It's got to be them.
Yeah.
It's not anyone else. It's just the white people's fault.
Yeah.
Everything is them.
That is the fear, isn't it, Melissa? I really appreciate it, and I completely understand why you feel so emotional about it. Me too. Paul is in Cardiff. We've got him on the line. Paul, what do you want to say?
Afternoon, Julia.
Afternoon.
I'm absolutely lost for words.
Yeah.
Excuse me. I don't know where we're going in this country, to be honest.
What do you mean?
Well, where was the conscience in the police that arrested him?
Yeah.
And the weapon that was used was then tried to be hidden.
Yeah. Well, by the time the police got to the scene, the mother of the murderer had taken his weapon and hidden it.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, it's only thanks to the footage on Henry Novak's phone that had been taken by his murderer, but also conversation between the two men. Of course, he wasn't drunk. That was proven his blood alcohol. Conversation with the two men in Punjabi in the back of the police car when they were taken to the police station, which was recorded by the police, where they were basically saying, right, well, I'm going to have to plead self-defence. I'm going to have to lie about what happened because otherwise, what's mum done with the weapon? I mean, they basically incriminated themselves.
I mean, the police are trying to get all knives off the streets.
Are they?
And I know. But within their religious, they can carry a knife. They're going to have all that stopped.
Yeah, I mean, Sikh, again, vast majority of Sikh men do not carry a knife like this and certainly don't ever use it. This cannot be acceptable. No one can walk around carrying a knife gratuitously in the street anymore. And
the problem is that racism doesn't work both ways.
Yeah, when we all know it does.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really appreciate your call, Paul. And again, another person I know very profoundly affected by this. Let's go to Carol, who's in Cornwall. Carol, what do you want to say?
Well, apart from being appalled and even really it's disbelief. Even though I know it's true, I can hardly accept it as being true. So it's terrible. But what I wanted to say also was that I don't agree with Dan Hodges. I believe that Kemi Badenoch. Yeah, I'm sorry. That she is. She's doing what all our political masters always do. She's trying desperately to shut down the debate. And by accusing Nigel Farage of trying to divide us.
Do you think so? She's accused. Nigel Farage, we'll play those videos again in a couple of moments. Nigel Farage basically said this is proof that we live in two-tier Britain, and the reaction is completely different. Silence to this from our political leaders, whereas taking the knee and everything else to George Floyd's murder on the other side of the planet, for goodness sake. She says Nigel Farage is taking sides. She says, I'm saying enough of this. We need to stop this racialising of our society and no two-tier policing, no believing that racism only happens to ethnic minorities. It happens to everyone. I mean, she's actually saying a lot of the same things, but saying we shouldn't be acting with anger. We should be.
She's not accepting that actually we do have two-tier policing.
But she just says no two. She's saying no. She's not. She's saying we do have two-tier policing and it needs to stop.
Well, she hasn't ever done anything about it when the Conservatives were in power.
Yeah.
I mean, you know...
She wasn't a Home Office Minister, to be fair, but
no,
yeah.
She wasn't, but...
The Tories did sod all about it.
Kemi Baganoff, I think, you know, I don't agree with what she said.
Okay.
I think that Nigel Farage has told the truth, and the point is, we are divided. People who say we are not divided are not facing the truth.
Yep.
We are divided into colours. White, black, brown, we are divided. And we need to get back into the, you know, I'm an old woman, and I can remember what this country was. And it was a great country. And we have gone so far down the pan that I'm not sure that we can ever get it back.
That's my worry. I mean, again, I was raised by, you know, very liberal lefty parents. I was absolutely raised, you know, Martin Luther King lines. You judge people by their actions and their words. You don't judge people by, you know, their skin colour, their sexuality, totally irrelevant. And that we need to get back to that. And that is absolutely the opposite of anti-racism, which is what these police are basically inundated with. And by the way, what our children are being taught in schools as well. Carol, appreciate your call. 12:38 is the time. We're going to take a quick break and then we are going to talk to David Shipley, investigative journalist and crime justice writer. That's up next. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. 12:40 is the time. Let's talk right now to crime and justice writer David Shipley. A very good afternoon to you, David.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for joining us. Obviously, want to talk to you about this absurd, horrible, disgusting, you know, haunting story involving Henry Novak. I say absurd because, as a couple of our callers are saying, they can't sort of quite believe what really happened after seeing that body cam footage. Everyone demanding that after that guilty verdict for Vikram Digwa, his murderer, last Friday. And then, of course, we had the sentencing yesterday, and finally we get to see that footage. And I think it really was as bad as many of us thought it would be. I'm going to play the clip we've got of that footage, and it's really important that people are aware. When people say, well, the police didn't know, it was dark, they were told categorically that this man had a mouthful of blood. He said he was stabbed 4 times. He said he couldn't breathe 9 times. So if you're watching, you'll be able to see a bit more, but if you're listening, you can certainly make out what's going on. Have a watch and listen to that body cam footage.
He keeps dropping side to side, so I'm just trying to keep him set up.
Right.
He's got a mouthful of blood. I don't want him. I can't breathe. I can't breathe.
Grab his other arm.
Help. So I've just come running behind the little on Stephanies Road. Come running around the corner.
What's happened to you, right?
Been stabbed.
You've been stabbed? Whereabouts? I don't think you have, mate. What's your name, mate? At the moment, you are under arrest. That's for assault, so you do not have to say anything, may harm in defence. If you do not mention when questioned, it's up to which you later line of court. Anything you do say may be given in evidence, all right? He's going to be sick, I think. He's saying he's been stabbed, so let's just check him.
Where do you think he's been stabbed? In the face? Oh no, but we have to check, don't we?
Right.
In the face?
Just get these to back off, get their details on that, and I'll keep hold of him.
Please, brother, I can't breathe.
It doesn't get any less haunting every time you watch it. But David Shipley, what did you make of all of that?
It's horrific, of course, and I imagine what it must have been like for Henry, to be attacked. We know he was left there for quite some time before the police eventually turned up because his attacker, chose not to phone the police initially, and then when the call was made, Gurpreet, the killer's brother, told lies to the police saying that Henry had racially attacked them and all this sort of this nonsense. But Henry must have thought when the police arrived that at last he was going to get help.
Yeah.
And instead, despite pleading for help, despite saying that he'd been stabbed, what actually happened was the police, because they are corrupted by anti-racist ideology, which is more properly anti-white ideology, chose to handcuff a dying boy and instead leave his killer uncuffed and free to wander around the scene because he had made a claim of racism. That's what happened here.
Is it your view, and this is certainly the view of an awful lot of people who've seen this, I think this is my view, and I think Nigel Farage has been very clear about this as well. He says there's proof we live in a two-tier Britain, certainly with two-tier policing after when you've got grooming gangs, Southport riots, the decisions made over the Nottingham killer in before and after the horrific murders committed by him. But that if the races of the two men involved had been reversed, and it was an Asian man or a black man lying on the ground, and it was a white man standing up, telling the police what exactly the same words, do you think that things would have been dealt with very differently by the police?
Absolutely. So Jonathan Hinder, the Labour MP and former police officer, last night was on TV, and he was talking about the fact that actually what police are supposed to do in this situation is immediately render aid to the injured person. You shouldn't be handcuffing them. So that would be the normal thing to do. Yeah. That would also be the human thing to do. If you arrive at a scene like that and someone is so clearly close to death, you aid them, you don't cuff them.
Well, and so clearly not a threat.
Exactly. And actually I spoke to David Spencer, who's also a former Metropolitan Police officer, this morning, and he was saying he thinks that this is actually driven by the fact that many officers are now so petrified of being called a racist. It's number one thing in their minds. And this is, this isn't just individual officers, though. Actually, if you look at the official documents published by the police, they make this clear. So Hampshire and Isle of Wight Constabulary, the police force responsible for Henry's arrest, produced a race action plan 2024 to 2026. It opens by talking about George Floyd's death in America.
Which tells you everything.
Yes, why the death of a career criminal in the US is relevant to British policing, I don't know. But it's this ideology has corrupted and seized the British police. And the plan itself is very clear. They say we have to have zero tolerance of racism. We have to be anti-racist in all we do. We have to understand and reduce our disproportionality. And what they mean by that is we have to focus on complaints of racism, and we have to relatively reduce the number of black and brown people being arrested and increase relatively the number of white people being arrested, because that's disproportionality. So that's the policy. And the police force are also running this Inclusion Matters course, which every officer has to attend. This is Hampshire Police. And they proudly state in their own documents that they've managed to reduce race disproportionality, that phrase again, in stop and search by nearly halved it. So that is what they have been driving. They have been encouraging officers to arrest fewer black and brown people, to relatively arrest more white people, and to really, really focus on claims of racism. So if you're a police officer operating in that environment, your career incentives are to focus on these things. So
they're very clear, aren't they?
Yeah. So the call comes in. There's been a racist attack by a white man against some Sikhs. They're saying we've been racially attacked. We've the audio of the 999 call is out there. They're primed before they arrive at the scene to treat the white boy as a victim, as a criminal, and the brown guys as the victims. Yeah. And I think then they just carried on automatically with that. So they ignored the evidence in their eyes. They all ignored the fact that Henry was dying. They ignored
because the programming was there. But you mentioned this, like Hampshire Police. This isn't about just these officers on the scene, and it's not just about Hampshire Police. I mean, I was mentioning earlier the National Police Chiefs Council and the College of Policing issued their Police Race Action Plan, and it's all about anti-racist. It says our vision is for a police service that is anti-racist and trusted by black people. Well, yes, trusted by black people because you're policing without fear or favour. 100% I would like that. But the plan seeks to create an anti-racist culture, values and behaviours within policing. This will inform all operational policing practice. Now, the crucial thing here is, again, a lot of people don't understand anti-racism. Like, cool, are you not anti-racist? Well, I'm not anti-racist. I'm not a racist. I don't want racism. But anti-racism is a different thing, isn't it? This comes from critical race theory. This, again, it's a theory, very much not a proven theory, quite the opposite of any evidence for this, where the idea is that oppressor, oppressed, oppressors are white people, by definition. Oh, they've thrown in Jews to that as well. Of course they have. And anyone who's brown or black must be the oppressed. And by definition, every scenario, you know, it starts from the fact that somehow white people are bad, racist, oppressors, and black, brown people are the victim. Now, this is both offensive to white people and to people of colour, I would say, by viewing people and lumping them in with their innate characteristics about which they can do nothing. And by definition is the opposite of what policing should be, which is, without fear or favour, treating everyone as equals and judging people based on what they do rather than, what colour their skin is.
Yeah, and I think it's important to recognise here that assumption that white people can't be the victims of racism is actually embedded in government policy. So earlier this year, the state published Protecting What Matters, which is their cohesion strategy. And it talks in there about hate crimes, and it lists Hindus, Muslims, Jews, and even Roma as victims of hate crimes, but it isn't a word in there, for example, the victims of the Pakistani Muslim rape gangs who targeted white English girls, or white victims of racially motivated murders, Richard Everett, Chris Donald, people like that. White people, the white British do not exist as victims in that frame at all. So this is the motivating ideology of the British state. White British people can't be victims of racism. If there's any racial disproportionality, it must mean making things a little bit tougher for white British people.
If more people of a particular ethnic group are arrested for certain crimes, by definition, that must mean that racism has been involved in the policing, as opposed to the simple demographics, like we were saying earlier. More black and brown people, largely black people, men, by the way, are arrested. More men are arrested for crimes because they commit more crimes. More young men are arrested because they commit more crimes than anyone else. That's not disproportionality. That's just you going after the people who commit the crime. But if the vast majority of stops and searches are carried out because of violent street crime, and they're being carried out in inner cities, and the vast majority of black people in this country are living in London and Birmingham and other big cities, by definition you're going to see a higher proportion. That doesn't mean there's any racism involved. It's just where people live.
Yes, exactly. And I think you're absolutely right. The baked-in assumption here is that if there's any disproportionality, that can only be because of racism. And that itself is a hugely anti-white position which the state has taken.
Well, what can be done about this? Because, we've got Kimmy Badenoch, we've got fluff nonsense from Keir Starmer. They're not going to do anything. No one pretends they will. They think us even having this conversation makes us bigots. You know that, I know that, our audience knows that. Nigel Farage gave a video statement today, and he's talked about how this is proof we live in two-tier Britain. He says that people should be enraged by this. Kimmy Badenoch says he's trying to divide people and he's grandstanding, but she also says that, we need to have an end to two-tier policing. What do we need to do?
I think Nigel Farage spoke for England this morning. I think he was absolutely clear about the problem, and he's prepared to name it, and it is a culture of anti-racism which is functionally anti-white. And it was, in my view, cowardly of Kemi Badenoch to avoid being honest about that. Nigel Farage was willing to say, white lives matter.
And you used to get sacked for that a couple of years ago.
Well, indeed. And I think, the Prime Minister, of course, has been nowhere. Andy Burnham hasn't opened his mouth about this at all. But thank goodness that Nigel Farage is actually speaking truth about this, because someone has to.
I have to say, a lot of people saying, the dignity and the fortitude shown by Henry Novak's family, his father, giving that statement, talking very calmly and doesn't want this politicised. But I think the rest of us who are not grieving our son or our brother dying, I think we not only have a right, I think we have a duty to be very angry about this, and not just say, as I said, I couldn't sleep last night. I could not get to sleep. I was just so haunted by this video and the words of this police officer. And then I just thought, I haven't got the right to be upset about it. We should be angry. We need to change it so this never happens again.
I entirely agree. I think I understand, Henry's family are full of grief and they might feel very strongly they don't want this to be politicised.
Yep.
But for the same reason that the Crown prosecutes people, we don't privately prosecute people. Actually, as a people and as a society, we have to change the political direction because the political system the police operate under makes events like this inevitable. It's not a random aberrant event. It's a natural result of the incentives which exist in the anti-racist police
This is
system.
the purpose of that training. David Shipley, really amazing to talk to you, investigative journalist, crime and justice writer. Thank you very much. This is sounding very, very clear, but we do have a competition for you. The FIFA World Cup kicks off next Thursday. It's very soon. Our friends at talkSPORT are sending you and a friend straight to New York City with Adidas, the tournament's official match ball supplier. It's the ultimate trip to watch England face Panama live at the MetLife Stadium. Return flights, hotel, match tickets and spending money all taken care of. Plus, Adidas is showing in the official Triondo match ball and a fresh pair of boots. So don't miss out. Here has how to enter.
For your chance to win, head to our friends at talksportwin.com or text TALK to 83338. Text costs £2.50 plus your standard network rate, or call 0343 418 7260. Lines close on the 12th of June 2026 at 4 p.m. That's when you'll need to answer your phone if it rings. 18 plus UK residents only. This is a network promotion. Full T's and C's at talksportwin.com. So for your chance to win, text TALK to 83338 now.
They found a label now, Ian, which allows them to sit at home on tablets, wasting their time.
Wow.
You've got the welfare state, I've already said, wonderful thing, isn't it? But a safety net, not a way of life.
When you're talking about crimes as vicious as rape, if someone is capable of doing that, they're a threat to society.
If they don't know that all of these things are wrong, then by definition, we need them off the streets.
This is the worst one I've ever come across.
But it's where you've got with this woke, fluffy, liberal, progressive nonsense about anti-racism.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. It's just coming up to 12:57. Just to let you know, Nigel Farage has referred the Henry Novak killer's sentence to the Attorney General, saying it's unduly lenient. Of course, life sentence, minimum 21 years before he can apply for probation. But again, why should he ever leave jail, you could ask? Let's go to one last phone call. I just want to squeeze one in because so many of you have been on the board. 0344 499 1000 to have your say. Tarquin is in London and wants to say his bit. Tarquin, what did you make of that video and the whole case?
Well, it's harrowing, isn't it, Julia? Absolutely harrowing. I'd like to try and get to solutions rather than talking about, two things that I would do. number one, we rushed through emergency legislation, all blades banned, despite no religious exemptions whatsoever. A bit like Dunblane and Hungerford, we acted then. We can do it again with blades. Number one.
No reason for anybody to be carrying a 21-centimetre blade around.
No need for it. Plastic one, you can have a symbolic one if that's what they must have, but the actual, unless of course it's in the course of a trade, like a joiner or
obviously,
which is the current law. We don't need to change the law on that. It's what exists.
Okay, next solution.
Yep. And the other thing we really need to look at the College of Policing here, because there's blood on the hands of these people, because they have allowed their officers to hesitate in the course of duty at these critical moments and hesitate thinking, oh my God, is this a career limiting move? I better not do. And therefore they just go inertia. They just go completely nothing. And, the fact that the surgeon said that he probably wasn't going to survive, dear fellow, that's not the point. If that man hadn't had the blade, none of the above could have happened. That's the whole point. We need to wind it back to the beginning and look to the cause of the thing.
But also, even just what the families had to go through, the final moments of their son being, handcuffed and read his rights, and basically being accused of racism, when he hadn't done anything to deserve what had happened to him, and not being comforted in his final moments of consciousness. Tarquin, thank you so much. Really appreciate the call. Thank you. Ian Collins is with me now. I mean, we normally have a bit of a joke at this stage, but I just don't think anyone feels like that. But you know what blows my mind is, like, when we're all being so haunted